Alrighty, hello and welcome to the Creedcast. My name's Dave, and as always, thank you for joining us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Pods, wherever other myriad of podcasting platforms are out there that I click submit to for on my little podcast sharer. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it and appreciate your support. Going into 2025, this is Tuesday, March 11th that we're recording this week's episode. That means that there is Port Adelaide football being played for premiership points this week. I'm super fucking excited. Also nervous as hell. I don't know what to think about it, exactly my emotions, which is pretty much the way I've been for most of my 36 years on this planet. Sorry, 37 years. Now I'm getting Alzheimer's already. But massively excited for footy to be back. We don't have any more episodes that won't be reviewing, previewing, talking about Port Adelaide footy in earnest for premiership points. So excited to be here talking about it with Jamie again. 2025. How you feeling, Jamie? It's game week. We're previewing a game later on in this episode.
It's time. Yes, hello everyone, and hello to you. Yeah,
I love
footy's
that.
back properly amid a lot of conjecture about when footy actually starts and when it doesn't and what it should in the future. But yes, Port Adelaide footy is back, and I look forward to previewing the season ahead. In fact, the very short term, but also I look forward to reviewing more than anything as the weeks go by with you. And I hope the listeners are just as excited as we are.
Yeah, I'm massively excited to have everyone along for the journey. We always love the comments, and as always, if you want to chime in, reply to tweets, comment on YouTube, whatever it may be, all that stuff we take on board, and we love interacting with everyone. So yeah, get into it. It's going to be there's going to be plenty of talking points coming real soon with Port Adelaide footy back for premiership points this week. Some footy was back for premiership points this last week, not as much as we were hoping for because cyclones and whatnot, and it's a whole mess of a thing. And now that there's already the post cyclone scrutiny of like, oh, it wasn't as bad, and I'm like, there's still fucking like flooding and roofs being torn off. Like, it was the right thing
for the worst.
Yeah, it was the right thing to do.
It's a very southerner attitude.
Yeah.
To a northern problem.
Yes, exactly. We couldn't watch footy on TV as people are fucking like watching their TVs float away in some areas of the northern states. So yeah, no, we're for anyone listening from up in any areas affected by the weather, whether it be the winds, rain, flooding, whatever it may be. I don't know. It's continuing as the week goes on. Thoughts with you, and hope everything's going well up there as well as it can be under the circumstances. But yeah, we had some footy this weekend, which came with it plenty of, mountains out of molehill controversies, really. There's nothing controversial actually out of it, whether it be, score bugs. The network wars are fun, like, Parkway Drives, like linking up with Fox Footy, which tickled my tank quite well. But then the rap that the Fox Footy did that got quickly deleted did not at all. That was terrible. But then they've got different. Did you see that?
Same thing. Look, I heard the discourse about it, saw a tiny snippet of it, heard a tiny snippet of it, and glad that it was kept at that. I don't know why TV networks and producers continue to try and do this stuff with people who are clearly inadequate in that style of entertainment. It's just an embarrassment to themselves. But yeah,
who thought, hey, let's get Ben Nixon to try to do the Kendrick thing? Like, no, let's not do that. Like, no, wait, what?
None of it. Yeah, don't do any of it.
Yeah,
like, just why? Like, I don't know what goes through some people's minds sometimes. On the first point you made, though, Parkway Drive, that was fucking excellent. And shout out to my brother Aaron, who got a few shout outs last year, and I know he'll be listening. Parkway Drive, right up there in his favorite bands list. And I'm sure he saw it in 0.5 of a second before he shared it with the rest of us. And but as a hard rock, heavy metal fan myself, definitely tickled my taste buds, let's say.
Yeah, yeah, it was really good. That's why it sucks seeing that rap thing, which luckily they deleted it. But it's just like you've just had a win, like you've had a great win with this, and they're using that
Yeah.
Parkway Drive bit a lot on the telecast and on Fox. Like I've been watching Fox Footy all week. Like now that I'm back into the schedule of watching 360 and taking in all the programs as much as I can. Like you're hearing it a lot, and I'm like, this is fucking good. Um, then just I had a snarky tweet in mind when I was standing out on the outer at Alberton on Friday night for the internal trial, which we'll get into in a moment. Briefly, there's not much to talk about there. But it's like because Buckley's involved in the rap thing, and everyone was like, oh, when the coaching decision with Port Adelaide was made, it's like, why didn't they go to market? I'm like, maybe they knew already that some of the decision making from some of these people that people have been positing as a coaching choice is not good, because Buckley should have said no. Like, there's a lot of people involved at Fox Footy that weren't involved in that video, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. Like who threatened them? Like who reminded them of their pay packet or whatever, Like whose
Yeah.
idea was this?
And why was
Like you said,
Patrick
they're
Cripps
on a
there?
winner. Just
Like,
leave it at that.
yeah.
Yeah.
You got two-time Brownlow winner Patrick Cripps. Like, why was he like? He doesn't. I don't think like they must like unless they've got some like video of him doing something he shouldn't be doing. Like they've held over his head and said, "We need you to just dance in this video here and there." Like, yeah. No,
It's a bit like that St Kilda when they did the pop version of When the Saints Go Marching In
oh,
clip. I can't. Yeah, do you know what I mean? And
I've
Nick
got a
Revolt
vague.
is trying to like
Yes.
harmonize and like vibrato his way through Saints Go Marching In, or it was probably, I think it was a dub actually, but it was very cringeworthy, and it kind of takes my mind back there when you
Mm,
mentioned that Fox Footy rap.
yeah. Yeah. There's again because there's a real history of like raps in sports. Like Liverpool did the Anfield rap in the '80s, which while somewhat iconic in a cult way, it's just like it is also objectively bad. I think the Dallas Cowboys did one years ago, and again bad, but it was all like kind of '90s, '80s kind of like rap thing. Like so, it was, and now you
Yeah.
look back at it, but it's just like don't do that in 2025, especially when you're trying to.
Well, I mean that's exactly, yeah. I mean, this rendition of a rap was akin to a '90s. But just the pacing of it and yeah,
The
I
swift
don't
deletion
know.
is such
Getting
a
really hung up on this, Dad, like for something that was put out into the world and then quickly removed
yeah.
after an epic guitar. I think it was Dan Gorringe on the Dan Does Footy podcast. He was it him? He thought that the Parkway Drive thing was at first like a few staff members, like John O'Brien or someone. I actually thought Jonathan Brown was on the drums at first. And I was like, no, wait, like that's all the members of Parkway
Yeah.
Drive, like doing the Fox Footy theme.
Yeah, I guess we've gotten so used to seeing the KO like Saturday with Jonathan Brown on there. You just expect you to see him in everything now. Like, yeah,
Oh man, they take up real estate in our minds through cringe and cringe alone.
yeah. Which I think is what's so impressive about the Parkway Drive thing is it just like it hit and it's just like this is just great. Like there's nothing cringy about it. There's nothing. It is just epic in the way they did it, and then it's just it is what it is. There's no and they Parkway Drive didn't overdo it. They just did the theme perfectly with this heavy beat drop and everything. It was just great. So
Mm.
every
Hmm.
Fox Footy need to whoever was like the think take for the Parkway Drive Fox Footy thing, like latch onto those guys, guys and gals and whoever it was, because those are the ones you need to do the idea generation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whoever
I'm
was,
picturing two separate like
yeah,
factions of the producing team. It's like, no, we want to go in this direction. It was like, no, we want to try this bit out, and yeah, there's clearly one winner for mine.
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I think the only other thing to talk about for the trial, I just thought it was interesting, and I don't think we've actually talked about it much. Like we haven't talked about it in text or anything in the last few days, but it was just very interesting watching the discourse around the coaching stuff between Adam Kingsley and Craig McRae during their game, a little spat they had, and all the like, what's the AFL going to do? Are they going to conduct up unbecoming? Which I think someone I remember if it was on the couch. Someone said that's just a made up thing. I think it might have been Buckley actually. Again, Buckley, I just gave shit for the rap thing, but he often does come up with like some good points on the talk shows.
Oh yeah, I
And,
agree.
Jared Waitley's been very strong on 360 about the AFL should be giving Ken his money back. I was wondering what your thoughts were on the whole thing. I'm pretty sure I probably know, but um, it is interesting seeing the AFL just literally go to their we make it up as our go depart we make it up as we go department and just making it up as they go and deciding not to sanction what
Mm.
was, and I agree with Jared Waitley, who said this is probably the right way to go, but it was also is what they should have done with Ken, which, and it's just like that's the thing that's hanging in the background. And he again brought up that the AFL is utilizing the Ken thing in promoting the last match of Gather Round as well. It is a really interesting early start for the AFL into being hypocrites because we haven't even played a game yet.
Yeah, look, AFL House a big brother, and we always love to punch up at AFL House. I loved the Ken v Hawthorn stuff late last year,
Mm.
much the same as I love the Kingsley and McRae. I do think the instances were a little bit different. Ken kind of kept going, whereas Craig McRae was being a little bit churlish and then got told to sit down, and he proceeded to sit down
By a man
because
with
who wants to go toe to toe with Adam Kingsley, who can bench the Empire State Building just about. But
Mm.
look, you mentioned off the top just about there's a lot of mountains out of molehills on all football media at the moment because there's fuck all football being played.
Mm.
I haven't really tuned in or watched a lot of it purely for that fact. It's all just confected rage over every little thing because these shows and both radio and TV shows need to justify their own existence at the moment. It's fun to call AFL House hypocrites. I, I both, on one hand, I think that the two instances were separate, so they should probably be judged a little bit separately. However, I still think that the Ken Hinkley thing was heavy-handed, and now the AFL has used it as a marketing tool. So that's the circus that we are always discussing and viewing and
Yeah.
living. But that's just the way I see it. I think the two instances were fairly different. The rumor mill goes on when things like this happen. And I heard that Max Gawn came out and said that Craig McRae, does get a bit chirpy at times in a jovial way. And that's the thing. If it is jovial, like it's kind of my go as well. So I might be
Yeah.
a little bit biased. Like again, I loved it. I
I think
love
you and I
both.
both want to
I
see
love
a
the
little bit
theater
of
of
it,
it.
as long as it doesn't go over a line, I think.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
coaches are there to be professional and be the elder statesman, so to speak, of the competition or the figureheads. And you don't want shit snowballing and getting out of control. I get that. But yeah, we're both world football fans, and it's not uncommon for two coaches on the sideline of any soccer game to kind of berate each other for what their players are doing on the field or whatnot, or a harsh penalty or a challenge or a foul or what, yeah.
When
But a lot
Diogo
of
Jota,
sports around the world.
yeah, I was just
What was
remembering, like,
that?
just when Diogo Jota scored, like when after I think Liverpool had blown like a almost 3-0 lead to Tottenham and I think it had been tied up 3-3 in the 90th, and then like from basically the next play, Diogo Jota goes and scores for Liverpool to put him up again, and Jurgen Klopp just charges out of his box right down in front of the
Yeah.
Tottenham coaches and just does a little like fist bump, like double fist, does like a kind of Frank the Tank motion almost, and like he said straight away
Yes,
afterwards that
yeah.
straight away afterwards, and
Yeah,
he always says he has a bit of
yeah.
white line fever, but I think we've got to accept that coaches are passionate and they're involved emotionally in the sport and the men they're leading on the field or the women for the women's side as well. This should be a discussion that the women's coaches are allowed to be passionate if they want in whatever way they need to be. But yeah, in this case, we're talking about the AFL men's competition, and yeah, I mean the Ken thing, you could see he kind of like immediately wound himself back. Not we're going to talk about that too much more, but I think Brad Scott on AFL 360, yeah, last night because they had the coaches' night last night. They had him and trying to think who the other one that was on. I can't think of it who it was right now, but yeah, Brad Scott was on there, and he kind of said he's because they talked to him about a few of the. I was Ross Lyon as well, and they brought up Brad Scott with Chris Fagan a few years ago, and he kind of said if you actually knew the words that were being said to each other, it's not that much news breaking stuff. It just looks the optics of it look bad, but what we're saying isn't actually that bad. We're having a bit of it's quite jovial in nature, and he kind of said if you ask Fags, he'd probably say the same thing. Maybe we had a disagreement on the day, but it's not actually that big a deal. Like coaches can have disagreements and talk a little bit, but it's not that bad. And he stood up for Ken a little bit and he said, what Ken did wasn't that bad in the grand scheme of things. So what happens if Ken gets 20 grand for that? What happens when a coach does something that's actually
bad does happen?
Really bad.
Yeah.
And Brad Scott, on the show, he kind of went, sorry, I'm saying Brad Scott. I mean Chris Scott. They're twins. Sorry, but
okay. When you said Chris Fagan, I was like, I'm pretty sure that was Chris Scott.
Yes, it was.
I didn't want to cut you off.
Geelong coach. Yeah. And he he just laughed and said, "What is it going to be like? $500,000 next time? Like this is their pay. This is their pay. There needs to be rules in place instead of made up rules and choosing what needs to
on the go.
Yeah.
Which the AFL House is known for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was interesting just to bring. I didn't want to talk about it too much, and we'll get into our internal trial in a moment. It's just because Hinkley's name has come up a lot in that talk because that is the comp for it. I thought it was an interesting little news story of the week, a little nugget, and it's just something that's captured my mind a little bit just watching, particularly when guys like Chris Scott were talking about it last night. It was interesting watching someone in that fraternity that's no connection to Port at all talk about it and kind of there's seems to be a lot of backing up of the fact that Ken was maybe treated a little harshly, even though he deserved to be a phone call. That 20 grand is quite a steep penalty for doing a plain.
I think most people in the biz have backed Ken and on the opposite have admonished the heavy-handedness of the punishment that occurred, particularly franked by the fact that we play Hawthorn and Gather Round as a marketing tool.
Yes.
I think everyone's fairly aligned in that. Perhaps the only ones that aren't are for bad faith reasons, like being opposition supporters of particular football clubs. But I
did turn off my mentions for a few days after that Hawthorn final last year because it was filled with a lot of Hawthorn fans that were big mad. So hopefully that can happen again in a few weeks when Gather Round comes around. Internal trial. There's not much to talk about with it. I know we
won.
Yeah. Port won. But then Port lost. Boo. Oh, bummer.
But, sack Hinkley.
Yeah. Oh shit! Start the car. It's the big news out of the internal trial. Obviously, was the Rosie injury, which doesn't look like it's actually anything to worry about. I mean, Port's injury report came out today, and he's not even on it. So whether that's a little bit of some cynics might say it's a little bit of gamesmanship on the side of Port and just trying to. But I trust it because you actually if you do anything wrong with your injury report and get found out for it, then you're in trouble. So it was a bad look on the night. I was texting you about how great it is to have crippling anxiety. I think I said crippling anxiety, footy's back.
Yeah. That's exactly, going through every scenario possible in your mind.
Yeah.
And doomsdaying.
Is it the syndesmosis or what's going on there? Because he looked very sore, Rosie, after. And to explain what happened for those that weren't there, I haven't seen it, basically. And the midfielders, so Rosie and HORNE-FRANCIS were matched up on each other a little bit at the contest in the middle, and it was great to watch. And Willem Drew was involved in a little bit of heat. Like Willem Drew took HORNE-FRANCIS down hard in probably the 30 seconds prior to this little injury happening. So there's a little bit of back and forth between the midfielders on both sides, which was really fun. So he got JHF, and JHF actually got Rosie once about 15 seconds before this tackle happened, like kind of slung him to the ground pretty hard. And Rosie got up and was racing away, and HORNE-FRANCIS got up and chased him down. I was watching it thinking, geez, these guys are going hard. And then when Rosie stayed down, I was like, oh no. I know exactly what the story's going to be. And lo and behold, fucking David King was like, this is the stupidest fucking thing I've seen on football.
What's he doing? Tackle him for? Yeah. Hip drop tackle. And again, confected rage because we've got nothing to fucking talk about, really.
Yeah. It was funny seeing that they because I think Lee Montagna talked about it and said, yeah, we were always told not to touch Lenny, like Lenny Hayes, just don't touch him at preseason training. And then I think David King said, yeah, when we wanted a session to end early, we'd just go and tackle Duck, like Wayne Carey. But they're
shit would hit the fan.
Yeah, at that point. Yeah, because I think he said, Montagna was saying like, fucking Ross Lyon had a rule, it was just like, don't touch Lenny. But this wasn't an internal trial. This is
not Lenny.
Yeah. This was an internal trial. Like, it's not. The whole idea was. I mean, I know they're probably trying to say, look, you should. And I there's a 50% of me that does understand what they're saying. Like, don't go after. And I do think like, but if their instruction was to go out there and play it like it's in earnest, like it's a game, I'm sure JHF probably was like, there was a little moment when they walked past each other and it wasn't. They kind of just walked past each other afterwards. Well, like Rosie's limping and HORNE-FRANCIS just goes past him like he's an opposition player basically. But yeah, you can't ask him to go out and play a game that's a 60-minute match sim and not tackle like they're tackling in a game. Like, it's a hard line to draw. This is the kind of injury that can happen in any time, like stub toe injury that it is what it was called. Can happen in training, can happen in round one. If we were playing a game this week, it could have just happened because of someone else tackling him. So it's one of those unfortunate things. Again, I'd like to think that the players can have a little bit more intuition about what to do in a moment. But then if HORNE-FRANCIS, if they were sent out there with the instruction to play this game pretty well in earnest, and I think Hamish Hartlett.
Well, they deliberately moved it to this weekend so that they had a continuous run into round one. So
exactly.
there would absolutely be a bit of that. I've heard mixed, reports on how effective we were playing against ourselves and some of the energy around the match sim itself. But yeah, they've moved it to this point in time deliberately. And players like JHF, bit of white line fever, you can't take that away holistically. And I think that, it could have been a lot worse of a tackle. To be honest, it's just an awkward thing.
Yeah. It was hot as balls down there too. Like, it was. I think when I jumped in the car, because again that they did a bit of a training session from 5 through to maybe 5:45, and then they did their match sim from up until around maybe just after 7 sometime. It's like 3 periods. I think 20-minute periods with a little break in between, in the middle of the periods as well. And when I jumped in the car and was leaving Alberton at, I want to say it's probably roughly 7:30, the car was still saying it was 32, 33 degrees at that point. And so it was warm, it was hot, and it was quite sticky sitting in the stands, having a couple of beers responsibly. But it was just warm. It was just warm and sticky. And so for guys, I mean, that's what they do training in preseason. But yeah, it was not the greatest of conditions to be playing a match sim. And against each other as well. It's kind of like, we're just doing this we do understand that we're trying to get some, and that's the thing. I like that there was some intent, particularly in those midfield battles. That was great to watch. And so you could see that they were competitive and they're itching to get out there and do this for real. So yeah, we want to see JHF be the best in the competition in everything he does. And he's had a longer preseason competitively in the Indigenous All-Stars system, and then he's looked good in preseason as well. So, look, it could have been worse.
He sure has.
And I'd like to think that maybe we can mitigate those things. But at the same time, if we're going to play a match sim, there's a little bit of leeway you have to give for them to try to simulate match situations. And if an opposition midfielder like fucking Finn Callahan, who had an incredible game on the weekend, was trying to run away on JHF, I'd want him to do exactly what he did to Rosie. So he simmed out
with a bit more vigor. But you want him to see the player and take it down.
Yeah, exactly. So and look, at the end of the day, knock on wood, that there's nothing shady happening behind the scenes. Rosie's fine, so might be a little bit sore for a week or two, but other than that, it wasn't nothing worth making too much of a molehill out of, or calling the stupidest fucking thing I've seen. Well, I've said that twice, and Kingy doesn't swear on radio, I don't think, but wasn't that big of a deal in the end of it. Like, all's well ends well. So, not many other nights. It was interesting watching Finlayson versus Mitch Georgiades. I put out a picture of it on Twitter, I think, and said kind of like, a matchup I wouldn't have seen coming 6 months ago. Just watching those two stroll around it, kind of like, they'd pushed up the field a little bit with the play taken back, and Finlayson being the following defender on Georgiades, and it was interesting to see that. Lockie Jones again impressed me.
There's a fantastic photo that was taken of him from the match sim, and yeah, he's looking good, Lockie. He's looking very good.
Yeah, he's
from a physical point of view. A still image only says so much, but that's enough for me, really.
That picture is so, because those training Guernseys they're wearing, which I'm just a humongous fan of, like with just the Port Adelaide Football Club text across the front and like either a teal or black version. There's a very old school, like 70s, 80s football feel to those. And Lockie Jones is a footballer just with the mullet and the muzzy, just aesthetic as well. So that picture just captures an aesthetic that is like, it's a high definition 2025 photo, but it looks like you've grabbed a footballer out of the fucking like 70s or 80s and just plucked him and put him into that spot. It's great. But yeah, he took some a great it's like kind of just attacking defensive, like his marking, which was obvious.
I'm so intrigued.
Yeah,
how his year goes.
Yeah, his biggest thing is going to be staying fit, which we can talk about. Well, I mean, we're going to talk about him as the year goes on if he's in the side, but yeah, his biggest thing is just going to be staying fit. I think we kind of talked about a little bit when we did our preview a few weeks ago, and go back and listen to that. Look for the preview episode in the feed from a couple of weeks ago if you want to listen to us talk about it. But if he stays fit, he seems to be, his game awareness seems to have, which has been improving year on year as well. He's just been maligned at times for a few moments that were, again, mountains out of molehills in moments within games last year. But yeah, nice little inboard kick for Farrell, I think, at one point as well. Just both his disposal and his ability to get to the point of the ball, get to the marking point for the ball, and a physical presence in the defense as well was really, again, obvious in the match sim, which we've kind of noticed a little bit over the preseason as well. Yeah. Nothing much else really from Hartlett. I think Hartlett was the one that I texted you about. I never look at but Hartlett was interviewed about it, and he kind of said that the coaches got into him a bit after the first 10 minutes, I think, because they said they were a little bit lethargic and the game wasn't really going anywhere. And then it was after that first 10 minutes that the game, some scoring opened up. Mitch hit a couple of nice goals. Lukosius missed from dead in front, basically, which again I just put down to just odd situation, because he and
suburban ground.
Yeah, beyond that, Lukosius had some really nice kicks and did kick it a couple of big booming goals, I think, at least one. So there was moments from everyone again. Like there's nothing in that match sim beyond the Rosie injury at the time that was making me have conniptions at the game. In the post days, there's a lot to like, and Joe Berry was running around looking great again. Richards had some nice moments. All the things we saw from the St Kilda game, kind of we saw in the match sim as well, or in the internal trial as well. So, still feeling pretty excited about more excited about the season than I was maybe like a month and a half ago, before we'd seen any evidence of what got these new recruits looking like. Now that we've seen some stuff both in internal trials, in games against other sides, albeit St Kilda are probably going to be pretty terrible. Rowies, I think I was listening to a little bit of 5AA, and Rowie is given the ironclad guarantee that the Crows will spank St Kilda by 100 this weekend. So,
right, okay, that's who they've got first up. Yeah, nice gimme for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of stats have the Crows as one of the absolute easiest fixtures of the year. So, I'm sure they'll do well with that, and good for them. But apart from that, there's nothing. I don't know if anything you've read from the match sim you want to bring up, but yeah, for me, I mean, the main news from it was the injury, which wasn't really much of an injury in the end. So, and Yeah.
Yeah, I had yourself on the ground saying that he was up on the deck in Burke's watching the rest of the game. So I
Yeah.
would imagine if there was anything majorly serious, he would have had a big chunk of ice wrapped around it and sitting on a deck chair or something with his. Yeah, yeah. I think everyone's just scrambling for feeling,
Yeah.
scrambling for anything footy related to put their mind to at the moment. But at the end of the day, I think we all just want the season to get underway. I expect Rosie to be there this weekend. So good that they got another run. It'll be interesting to see how it manifests into the early parts of our season, moving that internal trial to this weekend as opposed to prior to our preseason hitouts against opposition. Because we play a team that played in opening round, whereas we didn't last year. So, interesting how that opponent is shaping up, but we'll obviously get to that. In terms of the match sim, it wasn't live streamed. There's not much statistically to go off of. I'm just glad there wasn't any other major injuries. And as we kind of alluded to in our preview podcasts, there's a lot of players to fit into 23, funnily enough, with a couple of key outs down back.
Yeah, I've got the injury list in front of me, but we'll talk about that when we get to the Collingwood preview, which we're going to do towards the back end of the episode. What we'll do now is talk about the fixture that we've got ahead, just a few minutes on each game as we go, because we did this last year and it was an enjoyable way to just look ahead. Obviously, we've got Collingwood in round one. We're not going to talk about that right now because we're going to do a proper preview of that in a little while. So we go to round two, and we have Richmond at home at Adelaide Oval. It's a game I'm not going to be able to get to this year. It should be the only home one I can't get to. But it's just, my family who I work with had already booked something up on the day, and I need to be manager man. So I've got to
hold down the fort.
Yeah, and I said to him, I said, look, if as long as you make sure that like most of the fixtures I want the rest of the way are good, no disrespect to Richmond, but I thought that's not one of the key fixtures of the year, shouldn't be.
Yeah,
and I think that leads
apart from being the first home game, which
exactly.
has a little je ne sais quoi to it, but
it's that return to the game, like it's
return to Adelaide Oval in a football sense.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully,
warm weather.
Hopefully, once I see a date, I might be able to get to Adelaide Oval for a day of Redbacks cricket before. Oh, sorry, formerly Deadbacks, right? But anyway,
Deadbacks no more.
Yeah. But for as far as footy goes, Richmond 3:45. Geez, I know we talked about this at the back end of last year, so we don't need to get into it too much this year. But some of the times are odd and annoying for me with work, but that's just a me problem. But 3:45 on a Saturday, 22nd of March, Richmond at Adelaide Oval. I kind of led with how I'm feeling about it at the start there. I think this is one of the wins. And I don't say this as a disrespect to Richmond, but as we go forward, if I say a win in the bank, it's me more saying what we need to, if we want to be there or thereabouts in finals, these are the wins that we need to be just looking at as banked, but also we need to actually go out there and do the job. But me as a fan, I go, that's one we have to win and have to win without any trouble. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, so pre-season, we obviously jotting down the Collingwood game at the G as a loss. Much, much, much more interesting of a prospect right now. We'll obviously get back into it. So be that as it may, whatever happens at the G this Saturday, what will be, will be. But like you mentioned, the Richmond game in round two, much similar to the St Kilda preseason match, I believe. It's where we're going to see what we want to play like this year. And it's going to provide us a fantastic opportunity to display that in a game for points. I don't expect everything to be perfect in this first portion of the season. But that round two game is going to hopefully display what we're in for, what we want to be known for this year, and what our identity is. That's going to provide us the best opportunity early doors to display that. I think Richmond, yeah, everyone, it's well noted they're likely in for a world of pain this year. It'll be interesting to see how their season unfolds, just on an AFL perspective. But from a Port Adelaide perspective, we need to put this away and iron out the kinks of our preseason in regards to the game plan. Because perfect opportunity to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Richmond. I mean, it's their list has just undertaken a massive, one of the biggest changes you could have ever seen in a list. Like just the amount of stars they've lost with Bolt was gone. Rioli up to the Gold. He went up to the Gold Coast, right? Yeah. So
he did. Yeah. Baker left.
Yes.
Jack Graham left as well.
Jesus.
They've had some retirements of late, and their ex-premiership players are not getting any younger. Yeah. So,
and then even a couple of the guys they drafted, I think, are injured for the start of the season too. So, obviously. Probably they've got great futures, but they've even they were going to be blooding a lot of young blood, and even some of that's gone.
And Noel Bolter is sorry to cut you off. Noel Bolter is actually suspended, and he got an internal suspension for
that's from that FRACAS
the off-season controversy that he was involved with. I think it was an assault charge.
Yes.
Not to cast aspersions if that's wrong. I believe that's right though. Just got into a bit of fisticuffs, I believe.
The right story. There was a video released.
There was a couple of stories going around in the preseason from around the AFL. But
obviously we're just talking conjecture. But I mean that is the fact that he is suspended internally for an off-season incident.
I think it's like 6 weeks or something. So that doesn't help in their regard.
And I think it's one of those ones that's whether or not you were at fault or anything like that, but you still got involved in a physical altercation, and that's, you should be, and especially as a more senior player, you probably shouldn't be getting yourself into those situations. So they're both hurting from losses of experience, some injuries to the guys they're wanting to blood, and then some of the guys that are still there as experienced heads being suspended. So it's just one that we have to bank, I think, and we should be winning that comfortably. We have a short turnaround to round 3, Thursday the 27th of March, Thursday night footy over at Marvel, which is Portress East, fairly well over the last few years, against Essendon, who I think this is our first trip to play them over there since a certain former number 5 of ours broke their hearts. I'm pretty sure it's the first game there since.
Yeah, we played them at the G that night, though.
Oh, did we?
Yeah. It was a rare, because it was pissing down with rain as well.
Of course. Yeah. I forgot. Jesus Christ. Because that game was on at like 2:00 in the morning in the US when I was over there. And
right, of course.
Hammered. I was watching it like in the bathroom, having, unfurled the contents of my stomach a little bit. I was just sitting there with my phone watching Dan Houston win the game for us. So I couldn't have. But I do remember raining there. Anyway, it's the first time I think we're playing Essendon in Melbourne since then. At a stadium at a stadium that we're far more successful at in recent times in Marvel. This is one of those ones that's a little bit more 50-50 for me, because Essendon are one of the teams that's fighting for finals as well, and they've had reasonable win-loss records over the last few years without making finals. But again, this is one of those ones that if we want to be, we only play Essendon once this year. They're one of the teams lower, because we've got a hard fixture. We're playing a lot of contending teams, like upper echelons of the ladder twice, as well as wherever Adelaide are going to end up. Essendon once, I think, is a game that we need to be really going for as a win. That's a chance at an away win. I don't think, they're looking okay going into this season, but again, until we have some data in front of us, it's hard to say. But just from my, outside view of them, and again, I caveat no disrespect to any clubs when we're talking about them, it's just more what we desire. I think this is an away win we really need to be trying to go and bank. It's not as I'm not as confident as I was for Richmond, but yeah, Essendon for me is one we need to be going and winning away, being it's the one time we play them. And I think they're going to be, a team fighting for the bottom parts of the 8 rather than top parts.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup, particularly because all we've got to go off is last season's form. And I think on both sides, Essendon would be thinking if they want to get to where they want to get to, they should be winning this type of game because it's at home. And equally, if Port Adelaide wants to continue its home and away form and identity, this is a game that we should be winning as well. We play well at Marvel. We feel like we're a better club and in a better position than Essendon. So, yeah, equally, we should be thinking that we should be winning that game regardless of the fact that it's at like away from home, should I say. So, interesting prospect, I think, just from the little amount of Essendon preseason that I've taken note of, I think they're still susceptible to a bit of defensive breakdown. So, yeah, with our new game plan, which we'll have a couple of minor round games to go off of up to that point, will be interesting to see how that compares. But I still think that right here, right now, we should be expecting to win that game. Absolutely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Round 4, St Kilda at Adelaide Oval, which will be my home opener. Sunday, Sunday the 6th of April at 2:50 p.m. Yeah, and just odd time, but I mean we've already got the data from the off season, from the preseason, and St Kilda are probably one of those teams that's going to be in a similar world of pain to Richmond at times this year. They're offering 17 million to players, and they're turning it down. So I feel bad for some St Kilda fans when they have to deal with stories like that, because that sucks. But then St Kilda are proud.
Oh, and then he comes out and has an absolute blinder, like just to go, yep, that's how much I'm worth.
I had a multi on the weekend that was just in a bet with mates thing that I have, and shout out to Steve if he's listening.
G'day, Steve.
It involved Finn Callahan getting a certain amount of disposals and Nick Dacos, and then I can't remember what was it. I think it was a goals thing. Essentially, the only one I missed out on was Nick Dacos because he fucking decided to like basically at halftime. My bet was good. My bet was good, and then fucking he spent the entire second. Like Nick Dacos of all players just decided to cram.
I know
the entire half.
Yeah,
and
one of the most reliable players.
Yeah, we'll get to talking about that in the Collingwood preview. But yeah, Finn Callahan was the one that I was worried about in that multi, and then he just fucking cleared it comfortably. Anyway, and gamble responsibly. I don't want to be that one that's blaming a player. It's just funny to me. I take that view of gambling. It's just like when something like that happens, it's just like that's why it's a dumb thing to do. But it's just if you take the right attitude,
that's the risk you take. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, St Kilda. I mean, as I said, we've got data already. That's another one that we actually have to be similar to Richmond, just banking. It's at home. It's at Adelaide Oval. St Kilda are just none of not going to be anyone's business this year as far as a contending club. So yeah, we've got to be banking that as a win and moving on from that one comfortably, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, like you said, we have some data vis-a-vis St Kilda. Like we mentioned, though, they were fucking poor in that preseason fixture. It was a training run for us. So I do expect them to come out with a bit more vigor in a game for points, and knowing a Ross Lyon coach team, they'll probably start the season drilling down on some defensive efforts where they just absolutely did not display any of that in the preseason matchup. But 100% we should be winning, and winning well based on what we know up to this point. Of course, one thing I would say is I hope that everyone gives Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller a healthy reception so that it warms his cockles in regards to his suspected return to South Australia. That's not really suspected. It's more hoped that it comes to fruition, but definitely not one that I would pass up, I must say. But give him a good reception. But in regards to everyone else at St Kilda, fuck him, and I hope you smash him.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Got to give him. Got to start tapping him up a little bit, because I'm just funny watching. Just a slight tangent for just a second. I think it was a video. I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been SEN posted a video from Captain's Day of like asking captains who their favourite players in the competition was, and watching Bontempelli say Zach Butters. I was like, "You fucking cunt! You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing." So yeah,
I
let's do
heard
the
the sound grab from that. So shut
yeah.
up. Just shut up.
Fuck you, Bont. I love you actually. Like he's one of the players in the competition I do enjoy, and as a person
Yeah,
and a
yeah.
player. But like, fucking shut the fuck up. Keep.
Yeah, yeah. Although
It was like
I
a
heard him, Butters was a Bulldog supporter, so maybe I need to give him a hug or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's very Will Smith from the Oscars. It's like, keep my number nine's name out your fucking
Out
mouth.
of
Like,
Absolutely. Shut your mouth. Yeah.
but yeah, we'll give Wanganeen Miller just a nice little like Adelaide's a pretty cool place to play footy. Welcome. Round 5, which is gather round, which I'm very, very excited for. It's the first one I'm going to be on the ground for.
Me too.
Obviously, yeah, I'm looking forward to Saturday out in Lyndoch with you as well. But yeah, Sunday night, the 13th of April, as we talked about earlier, the AFL has very cheekily decided that they're going to use 20k Ken's little, conduct unbecoming to market the Sunday night footy fixture of gather round with Hawthorn at Adelaide Oval at 6:50 on Sunday evening of gather round. This one, and we've seen, or obviously Hawthorn are one of the teams that were lucky enough to get to play this weekend, this last weekend after everything going on. And they looked reasonable. I think Sydney looked okay as well at moments, and I put out a little snarky tweet about Ollie Florent having a moment again because I think that really just
Yeah.
that game was in the balance at that point, and then he just fucking like again undercooks a kick and
Didn't make the distance.
yeah. He wasn't prematurely. Jesus Christ, David, get your shit together. He wasn't celebrating early in that moment though. He was just very, very dejected.
This is learned his lesson in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. Hawthorn is this one's one. Obviously, recent history against Hawthorn at Adelaide Oval gave us incredible entertainment last year, both in the form of the 41-point comeback that culminated in the DBJ winner, which we'll talk about later on. And then obviously that incredible semi-final that you and I were both at, and it almost broke me as a person, but then also gave me just one of the greatest, one of the great nights to be at a football game ultimately. So yeah, the recent history against Hawthorn, there's nothing to suggest otherwise with how they've started the season that they're going to be any less of a threat. More so this year, they've kind of the talk is now that they're now targeted and they stood up to the challenge last weekend. So this is one that's a true 50-50 for me. That going on the assumption that we do start the season okay and play a game plan okay and bank a couple of wins against those teams we've just talked about, it's going to be a close one. Obviously, I'm going to, just for the sake of it, I'm going to predict a close win. But this is the first one of the season that I'm genuinely like could see us losing this one very easily as well if Hawthorn are on song. And they clearly last year demonstrated they have no qualms about coming over and playing good footy and kind of embracing the hostility of the away fan. And they do have fans that travel pretty well as well. So
yeah, they absolutely do. Yeah, I feel the same way. It's a genuine flip of the coin at the moment. We're going to be 4 rounds in up to that point. 5 for them. I don't know when they have their bye. Regardless, we'll have a little bit of a track record, but being that it's at home, like you said, a close win is probably what we could assume. Obviously, not knowing how we're going to play, but if you're mapping out the season and trying to look at games where you would think we would win or we'd hope to win because we're at home in this instance, it just or like when you're doing tipping, this is a bit of a 50-50. Being that it's at Adelaide Oval, I think we match up well against them. It'll be interesting to see how both ends of the field match up to that point. Their recent acquisitions and our team, Radigalia, for example, potentially coming back, how that shapes up in round 5. But one to look forward to and a real challenge, obviously putting the Collingwood fixture to one side. It could really go either way based on recent fixtures and Hawthorn's opening round match against Sydney, like you just mentioned.
It's massively looking forward to it. But and I think that's a good way of framing it, that if we're going to be there or thereabouts for finals, then we need to be winning the home games in our double headers that we have this year. Hawthorn we play twice. We need to at least be winning the home game in all of those instances and going 1-1 against those teams if we're going to be anything in business at the business end of the season. So you'd want to be banking that one. And we have we're 2-0 in gather round so far, so we want to keep that record going too.
True. Yeah. Good point. I certainly hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. Being that I'm going to be there and looking forward to it. A week later, Sunday the 20th of April in mid-afternoon local, 3:20 p.m. local, we play Sydney away at the SCG. Beyond, obviously, the prelim final last year, less said about that, the better. Reasonable history at the SCG over the last few years. I know. Koshy mentioned it in the lead up to the prelim last year, which did my head in because I'm like, as soon as you say that stuff, it's like my brain goes, well, then now we're going to lose, and
fate is sealed.
Hindsight's 2020, so I can say that was Koshy's fault now. But no, I'm being snarky. But we do have a reasonable history at the SCG. Beyond that, obviously mentioned earlier with Ollie Florence undercooked kick that Elia saved on the line, and I always remember Pal Pepper's debut for us was up at the
SCG, that's where my mind went as well.
Good wins up there, and obviously we fucking absolutely spanked him in one of the best pure displays of football that I've seen Port execute in recent years in our home fixture last year. It's all going to depend on what Sydney's fitness isn't. Obviously, Errol Goulden's injury is a big one. So he's a big out already. But we're going to be. I mean, we maybe didn't touch on it, but Zach Butters might be back around this time. Like I think the
interesting point.
Favorable timeline is that Butters could be back for Hawthorn, but I'd expect, if not Hawthorn, maybe this one would be the return. Sydney looked okay on Friday night, but they're an imperfect team, and we as Port fans know as good as any. Big, heavy grand final defeats, especially if you've had a couple in a couple of years like they have, what scarring, because, Port players years afterwards, once they were past it, kind of, I think Corns has mentioned, it did affect us for a few years after, and obviously they went through the doldrums, and whether that's going to be a thing or not. But this is one of those away ones that I'm just like, with how they've started the season, with the injury to Goulden, it's just like there's a real lot of angst. It's obviously a new coach as well, and Dean Cox, and it's again, talking heads looking for too much to talk about. Like I think David King talked about Dean Cox's coaching. I'm ragging on Kingy a lot tonight, but he ragged on Cox's.
He's a main culprit of this type of thing, though.
And I don't think I don't think the coaching performance was actually that bad. There was just a lot of moments in the game, like the Florent kick that affected them ultimately on the night. On Friday. So I think this is a team, again, this is just looking forward, but at the moment, they're a team kind of that are just a little clipped in the wings at the moment. And, depending on how the season starts with both teams, it's another one to look at and go, maybe that's a nice little away win we could get. But it is a 50-50, and Sydney at the SCG, when they're playing well, are a tough one to beat. But, it's a 50-50. It's not one I'm predicting as a loss, but, it's one, I'm not exactly sure how to feel about it, but I've got a little bit, just at the moment, with what's going on at the moment, I've got a little bit of confidence we could go up there and maybe snag something.
There is a lot of trepidation around the AFL community in regards to Sydney and how their season may unfold, obviously with the points that you raised. And we're getting a little bit into the season now, like with this preview, round 6, a lot of sides are getting into their work by this stage of the season, by round 6. So, look, like you said, all we have to go off is kind of recent fixtures and Sydney's okay game against Hawthorn the other night, and Port Adelaide with no form, but we've got a good record. It'll be interesting to see where we're at by that stage of the year. Look, if we lose admirably, I'm not going to be too disappointed. I wouldn't have thought, because of potentially how the first 5 weeks prior to this may go, and the little let up we may get after that. Not that we're going to go through every game. But yeah, looks tough on one hand, but considering how we match up against Sydney in recent times, yeah, where their heads are going to be at 6 rounds into the season, it'll be an interesting prospect. To sit on the fence, it is a genuine 50-50. Look, much like there's trepidation with Sydney's season, there is trepidation with Port Adelaide's season, how it may fare. If I'm to call it right now, I'll probably go with Sydney. But I absolutely still believe that Port Adelaide, if we get our structure right and we play with as much confidence in round 6 as I believe we're up to, then we can absolutely win it, for sure. But you can't win every game at the end of the day, and Sydney would be hoping to win that one at home.
Yeah, they would, and that's depending on knowing their fixture. They could be looking at that one as one that they, in a few weeks, that they're like, oh, geez, we need to win that one and get our season back on track. So, it could be a real kind of like clash of teams. And an important game for both teams, and every game is important. But it's an interesting one because Sydney used to be a team that filled me with a lot of dread, and they still do a little bit. I think with just the historical memories, and maybe it's just PTSD.
Yeah, and it's mainly from like 05 to 2012 or whatever it is. Like, it's like over a decade ago.
Yeah, it shows that what we deal with as we're growing up really does affect us going forward.
Because we actually have had a fantastic record against Sydney in the last decade.
Oh, geez. Speaking of a team that was, childhood trauma, but we've had a decent record against in recent years. North Melbourne is our next game after Sydney. It was Saturday, 26th of April at Adelaide Oval. North Melbourne, I think Wardlaw's injured for a while. It's a one straight off the bat, I think. There's one of their big young guns anyway is injured early, and it's not Sheasel, so I'm pretty sure it's Wardlaw. There's a 3:45 game again on a Saturday, Adelaide Oval, North Melbourne. That's one that I'm banking as a win as well. I think North Melbourne are going to click at some point, but I just don't think they're quite there yet. That's just one that I'm just like, call that a win and move on. Those are the ones we need to be winning.
Yeah. Again, we're getting a bit into the season now. North would be hoping to improve. Obviously, that goes without saying, but Adelaide Oval, we're a club in a much better spot as a whole. Yeah. Not much more to say. We should win that.
Yeah.
Without knowing what, 6 rounds prior to that, we're all going off of not much at the moment, but yeah.
It's purely just speculation with a bias sport lens. We'll go through to the bye week, and then I think we'll leave it at that, because then at that point in the bye week, we'll do a review of the season and then preview the second half of the season at that point. So I think that leaves us after North Melbourne four more games to look at. Western Bulldogs at Mars Stadium on Saturday, the 3rd of May, and like at the lunchtime kickoff. That's an intriguing one for me because Mars Stadium obviously is, again, we're talking suburban style grounds, Ballarat weather, Mars Stadium in Ballarat, of course, which comes with a lot of conjecture from fans that have to be the team going and playing over the Dogs over there. I know Crows fans have had to deal with it over the last couple of years, and one they've complained about a little bit. But it's also intriguing because Bontempelli's out for the first 6-7 weeks with a calf injury that's worse than originally feared. And the way he's talking about it is just like it's deep in the muscle and it's going to take time to recover from. And
I think could be a tendon injury. Yeah.
I think his timeline's to return a few weeks before that. But if it does, he's the way they're talking about it at the moment is just like, we don't exactly know. This is what we think will happen. But it'll be interesting if he's still not quite back. They're not bringing him back for fucking Mars Stadium out in Ballarat. So they just wouldn't risk him on that surface. So that's and they're dealing with a lot of injuries at the start of this season. It's kind of shaping up that they could be getting a lot of players back by then. So I'm going to assume a closer to full strength Western Bulldogs side, but there's still a side that I don't know. I think we've had outside of the that final, of course, a few years ago. I think we actually match up okay against them, considering the talent they have. And the Mars Stadium thing is just a big wild card of it, like how we play that. And
who wins the toss?
Yeah, it's a real. There's a real cricketer's thing to it. Yeah, it's probably one that I'm actually a little bit wary of, just because it could just throw up that wild card thing of like, if the weather's shit and we just go over there and just don't have a good day out, because it's it's not in the depths of winter, so that probably helps. But it could be, you could have the shittest day of the year in May as well. So that's one that's probably has a little bit, like, if we were playing them at Marvel, I'd feel more confident. That's the
yeah, funnily enough, yeah.
So I'm excited for it. Just to I'm still actually thinking about possibly going, just because I'd like to see games in weird places. So but yeah, it's one that fills me with a little bit of trepidation. I'm wondering what you're thinking about looking forward to that one, being that it's one of those unique, non-traditional stadium games.
Yeah, like this starts off a month that's just full of unknowns for me. And Bulldogs, although like you said, we had a good recent record against, apart from the obvious preliminary final disaster, they're still a team where, similar to the showdown, no matter where both teams are at, I still just kind of feel a bit uneasy with the Bulldogs. So it could, it is an interesting prospect. Erring on the side of maybe dropping it, but although there's a lot going on with that club in terms of injuries outside of the obvious Bontempelli, but then the Jamara Ugle-Hagan saga, as well as that, how much does that off-field stuff contribute to on-field performance? So it could be an interesting prospect, probably on the safer side. Probably go a loss with that one.
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling. It's just one of those ones that feels like it could be dropped if we're the A game's not there. Which is just the perfect lead in to then the first showdown of the year, which is a week later on Saturday, 10th of May, one of our rare night games at home, 7:40 on a Saturday night. So Saturday night footy against the Crows. It's our home showdown. So make sure everyone's got, I'm sure I don't need to remind any Port fans to have that one marked in the calendar. But that's our home showdown, Saturday, 10th of May. You have to be aiming to win every showdown, obviously. Our recent history is just weird in showdowns, which always fills me with trepidation. Considering our ladder position versus theirs over the last few years, we should not have fallen behind the ledger like we have. It's been a real curious oddity of the records over the last few years that the Crows have just played us really well. And I don't see any reason that it's going to change. It's going to be about what we do in the game to make sure that we can mitigate the fact, because they're going to play us pretty well. I don't know what Nix does, but he gets them set up well to play us, and certainly their recruits they're going to be a better team this year than we've seen, I think. It's all going to be at our preparation, because we've shown in plenty of times over the last few years that we can beat really, really good football teams in high pressure matches at times, but then we've fallen away. It's all a between the ears thing, I think. Yeah, I don't know where. I'm just going to say we should be winning this one, because I think we have to win one of them this year. Obviously, I'd hate to go 0-2, so our home showdown's probably the better chance for it. So I'm going to call it a win, but it's a 55-45 proposition for me, because it's a showdown, and recent history is that they've played us pretty damn well. And I hate saying it, but beyond a couple of ones where we've beaten them well in the last 2 to 3 years, they've given us a pretty good game every time, and often got the win. Particularly last year with that 5 goals 18 performance we put on in their home showdown. It's not that we don't get the chance. It's just we've
oh Lord,
we wilt under the lights there a little bit. So we need to hopefully turn that around in this first one. But it's a close run proposition for me.
Yeah, we win.
Oh, I like the definitiveness of it from you there.
No, we need to win. Yeah, we need to get the showdown ledger in the positive from the first opportunity, I should say. So yeah, we need to win that. The game plan, like you mentioned, Nixie getting their team up for previous games. Our old game plan always worked in their favour more often than not. But now it's supposed to change, and although they're supposedly a little bit better, time will tell by round 9, and it'll be interesting to see how those two game plans match up without Charlie Dixon in our forward line. So but we need to win that one. Like you said, home showdown for us. Need to get it off on the positive.
Yeah, a more dynamic forward line that it looks. And again, I mean, one of the few things I got out of the little internal trial was the forward line. What the movement is again still more dynamic. There's just more, there's no focal points, so they're actually there's targets looked for. So I mean that is something the Crows did kind of eat up on, was just the fact that Dixon was the ball was often going there, and that's how they found some luck. So hopefully that new game plan stuff we're talking about comes to fruition over the first 9 weeks and leads us into a nice showdown win against the Crows. So the hits keep on coming, because then a week later we again get a pretty tough proposition at Adelaide Oval, and a team that I don't even know how we play them anymore, because depending on which quarter it is, last year we were the fucking best side on earth against Geelong, but then in another quarter at Adelaide Oval we were the worst side on earth. So Geelong always fills me with PTSD and all sorts of issues at the best of times. So Geelong, after a showdown, which is how it fell last year as well, actually. It's just we had Adelaide away and Geelong away last year. We've got Adelaide at home and Geelong at home this year. It's really weird to me, actually. Anyway, Geelong at home, Adelaide Oval, Saturday the 17th of May. They're a team that's, under audit for all the players they keep bringing in. I'm being facetious. I don't think there's anything to worry about there for Geelong fans. But
further facetiousness goes, but we need to keep in mind that I think we're also being audited at the same time.
Yeah, Tom Morris reported that it is
this
just
is the audit game.
The AFL just audits 2 teams every year. So apparently is what I think Tom Morris reported. And we're the other team being audited alongside Geelong. And there's Crows fans out there saying, look at Jason Horne-Francis' parents, MG, in their fucking driveway. Geelong at home. I don't know. Because they got Bailey Smith now, and they've actually a lot's going to be determined by how their surprise young stars that they draft, like Lawson Humphreys and the gems they unearthed last year, how they progress this year. Now that the targets, they're more known.
Yeah.
But assuming that they develop okay, because Geelong have just had a good history of it in the last 15, 20 years. Again, just another fucking tough test. And it's just, again, because it's at home and we have to play them, that this is one of a run of games that we're playing at, teams that we're playing twice. And because it's at home, I go 55-45. But again, I could genuinely see us, if we're not on song and Geelong have a decent start to the year, it's definitely a tough one. And we need to get a little bit of retribution for what they did last time to us at Adelaide Oval. But wanting the retribution doesn't mean it's going to actually happen. And it's a lot. It is one that in this month of footy that I'm worried about as well. And again, it's just Adelaide and Geelong back to back is just like having to deal with Hitler and Stalin in 2 weeks.
It's how the fixture shaped up last year. Yeah. Except, like you said, they were both away fixtures, and they went the opposite way to, I think, what we were thinking they would go last year. So I don't know how that translates to this season. Maybe it doesn't. But I mean, like I said, like this month before the bye, we could we could win. Absolutely, we could win. But we could also lose horrifically too. So,
Could be a
but this one being
season-defining
at
marker.
home, yeah, it
Way.
would be. Yeah, up until that point, you can imagine just the talking points around this time of the year. But yeah, look, like you said, retribution would be on the cards. It's probably would be a theme leading up to this match. And at Adelaide Oval, we have an all right record. We've obviously copped some losses even at home against Geelong. I think those were some stronger Geelong sides. And I mean, I say that even after we got humiliated by them last year. Um, Bit of a transition period for Geelong still. They're always good. It's hard to gauge, but being at Adelaide Oval, we need to prime for a win.
Mm. Yeah, that's why I edge on the side of win, but yeah, it's going to be a tough one, and yeah, it'll depend on how our game plan's going, and yeah, some of their development and keeping guys like Dangerfield's fitness and hamstrings seems to be a storyline every year. So yeah, it depends where he's at and
Yeah,
that year as well.
yeah.
Um,
If he's
our
blown one
last
out,
Yeah. Our last match before the bye, and so the last one we'll talk about today, Freo at Optus Stadium, which, plenty of people are saying Freo's a smoky for the flag for them, or no, not even just a smoky, like some people are just picking Freo for the flag with some of the recruitment they've done and whatnot. So, yeah, Freo at Optus Stadium's got to be one that you look at and go, geez, that could be a tough one based on what we're hearing. And they're one of the teams that we played like this run of games, these 3 games from Adelaide through Adelaide, Geelong, Freo to get us into the bye. 3 teams we have to play again later in the year, which is just fun. Football is fun, and we again play. I've just had to look forward, and we'll preview the second half later on. But we play Adelaide, Geelong, Freo in a row again later in the year. Yeah, fun fixture. But yeah, Freo at Optus Stadium. If they're the team that we think they're going to be this year, or what pundits think they're going to be, we're maybe not as strong as the top 4 this year. You got to be sitting there thinking that's probably a loss to go into the bye. Just if I'm being objective, of course, anything can happen. We weren't meant to win at Geelong last year, but objectively, just looking forward, I think we go into the bye with a loss. Hopefully, with a decent amount of wins before that, but I think we might be going into the bye on the back of a loss against Freo there.
and we weren't supposed to beat Freo at Optus last year either,
Yeah.
but we did without Dan Houston as well, I might add. In saying that, though, I do expect Fremantle to be better this year. I don't believe that they're going to be astronomically better like a lot of other people do just by recruiting Shea Bolton. They have a good squad. They have a good balanced squad, in my opinion. But yeah, the attitude towards Freo is quite high hopes, in my opinion. Like I said, I think they're going to improve. I do probably peg this as a loss at this point in time as well. But I think it's going to be more of a contest than what other people may believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that you've got some confidence because this is the one when I was looking at it earlier. I was like, I'm like a little bit, and maybe it's just a little bit of going to Western Australia fear, which is odd because Port Adelaide is actually a club that's actually got a decent, one of the best histories in the competition of going to Western Australia and getting wins against Freo and West Coast over there. Certainly, our early 2000s form helped that, but that prelim semi final in 2014 when we came back against that very very strong Freo
Great
side.
game.
I've got the
Yeah.
DVD somewhere here, and I've watched it a few times. One of those Port Adelaide Classics box sets that came out at JB Hi-Fi years ago. Long live physical media. Yeah, I've watched that game a bunch. Look, good Chad Wingard, good Robbie Gray game, just good era of Port Adelaide footy, of course.
Oh yeah, Robbie Gray's third quarter was fantastic.
Good God, just little. All right, I feel better about the game now. Let's beat Freo and everyone just lead into the bye.
Because I mean, they're a well-balanced side, and like I said, I do expect them to get better. And like we're going into the weeds of a game just before the mid-season bye, but they're still a young side, so
Yeah, and there's
that
a little
may
bit.
have its drawbacks.
There's a little. I mean, it's minor. I think every club's going to deal with this these days. It's modern footy, but it's just interesting they're dealing with the Luke Jackson thing going into the season as well, which is just a funny one. But then I'm trying to think who they're talking about trying to there's a player that they're talking about trying to get, right?
Marlon Pickett.
Keziah
Pickett,
sorry.
sorry.
One that was on our radar a couple of years ago, and that seems to have completely dissipated. I remember, I don't think I'm speaking out of school now because it's just old news now, but I remember when I went to a Hey Diddle wine dinner and Jonas was there, and it was off season, so Tommy Jonas was enjoying his own product quite responsibly, but at length.
Non-responsibly.
Yeah. I was trying to think of
Same
what that. Had some great chats with him though, and he's a great bloke to talk with. But yeah, he talked, and this was the year before his final year, and when we realized he was going to, and someone, I didn't bring it up, but someone else standing there was just like, what's the Cozzy Pickett thing? Because I think at that time there was talk about it, and Jonas kind of just swilling some wine in his hand said, yeah, it's not happening. Yeah, it wasn't going to happen this year, but we're into him for next year. And then that obviously was now a couple of years ago now, and nothing happened.
Yeah.
It genuinely, I think, was a storyline at the time. Port were looking into it and quite seriously in the list management sense, but I guess it just didn't fall through, or it's just maybe they found out that Cozzy was still looking towards the west, because that seems to be the story now. That's a tangent. Anyway, Freo Optus leading into the bye. I'll stick with my first but you've made me feel better about it. I appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still pegging a loss, but
yeah.
A competitive loss.
Yeah. So looking at that, and again, we did this last year and we'll do it again this year. Once we get to the bye week, we'll do a review of what's happened so far, and then we'll look ahead at the second half fixtures. But I think just in a rough look, I didn't actually keep notes of how confident I was. I'm at probably, if we win the ones we should against teams that are 50-50 on, and then win the ones we should that we're comfortably better than, we should have. I'm thinking we could be 7-4 at the bye, at worst, which is probably thereabouts for what.
Yeah, at worst, I would probably say 6-5.
Yeah, true.
I think 7-4 is a
Yeah.
realistic prediction.
Yeah, because 6-5 has us, beating Richmond, Essendon, St Kilda.
But maybe dropping the Hawthorn gather round.
Yeah.
Or the showdown.
I mean, 6-5 has,
or the Geelong game. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a few.
We only have 6 games at. Sorry, no, we do have 7. No, we have 6 games at Adelaide Oval for the first half of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we only have 6 games at Adelaide Oval before the bye. So, if we win, if you just go straight and go, we protect home field, then that's 6-5, right? So, yeah, yeah, and then if you still
that's why I'm hoping.
Yeah,
at worst 6-5 by the bye.
Yeah. It's this little adventure for us on the podcast going through the first half like this is just more or less it's an adventure in just it's almost therapy in a way, just to look forward and actually get an idea in your head, like you were talking about with the Kane Corns thing that he does, like predict something and then hope you're wrong or whatever. Like it's it's an interesting.
If anything, it'll be an interesting study case for when the bye actually does arrive and where it compares.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't have anything else on the fixture, we can get to the game that we haven't talked about yet, which of course is our first preview of the year, and that is talking about Collingwood, who we play at the MCG. Our one MCG game of the year this year is just smacked at us in round 1 this Saturday, the 15th March, 7:35 p.m. local for us. So that would be that's an 8 o'clock game over in Melbourne, I guess. Or is that 7? Is that local for? No, I'm reading the fixture wrong. That's local over there.
It's 7. Yeah, it's 7:35 in Melbourne.
I went backwards. I went the opposite way. So yeah, 7 o'clock for us watching here in Adelaide on this Saturday night. Yeah, it's an interesting one because obviously Collingwood have played round 1. Oh, sorry, opening round. I just just get rid of opening round. I need to just be able to say round one and actually mean round one. But Collingwood have already played this year. How, just before we get into it, how are you feeling about Collingwood as a team based on their performance last weekend? Because there's a lot of, obviously, Collingwood being at any week are going to get a lot of media news because it's Collingwood. They're kind of like the Dallas Cowboys of the AFL, which is everyone hates them. Yeah, there's an interesting game this last weekend because I think I'm of the opinion that statistically it was closer than it actually showed at the end.
Yeah, for those fans of X score, particularly Collingwood fans, hanging on to that X score in regards to what you're saying for sure, because it did paint a different picture.
You can't see it, obviously, but my iPad's to the left of me, and the X score is literally what's staring at me. I've got it in my notes.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
How are you feeling?
And it's something to be wary of because it does paint a bit of a picture in terms of how they should have fared against the Giants. But ultimately, the scoreline provides a promising prospect for our fortunes this weekend. And yeah, no one's perfect in round one or round two for them. And they've got a debut member to their club that hasn't played with them before in Dan Houston. So how that'll go is an interesting subplot. I think if he had it his way, he definitely wouldn't be debuting for his new club against his old club. So can we exploit that? That'll be an interesting thought. An interesting, subplot, like I just mentioned, on top of everything else that goes on around the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. For those playing at home, and if you're watching on YouTube, I'll pop the X score up on the screen right now. But the X. So Collingwood lost by 52 points. I think it was exactly double the score that it was what GWS ended up scoring.
GWS,
on X score, which is one of Jamie and Maya's favorite accounts on Twitter. GWS's expected score was 87.7. We scored 103. Collingwood scored 50, but their expected score was 85.2. So essentially, it's a 2.5 point win on expected score, but was a 52 point win in reality, which is one of the biggest margins I've seen on X score versus like from what we've seen as objective, like what we look at and what media have said is like a really good win for GWS and a really disappointing performance in Collingwood. But when you look at it and go, well, Nick Dacos was cramping for an entire half of football. They were, profligate in front of goal, because there was at one point, I think Collingwood kicked goal to bring them within 20 points early in the fourth quarter, and at that point the commentators were like, "Oh, they're coming," and then obviously they did not come. Don't snip that, anyone. 20 points down early in the fourth, and there was they had the exact amount of scoring opportunity. Like as far as the scoreboard goes, like points and goals, the scoring shots were exactly the same, but they were 20 points down, and they ended up losing by 52. They kind of ran out of steam at the end. There was the Dacos cramping and just a whole bunch of stuff kind of snowballed for them in that last 15 minutes. But they were there or thereabouts right up until early in the fourth, and it's just like one of those games that I some people are going, "Oh, Collingwood are there for the taking," and I'm like, I'm still quite trepidatious about it. I do look and go, some of their ball movement and carry was a little bit slow and sludgy, and obviously Dacos cramping doesn't help that. But they didn't have Dan Houston in there either, so it's just like, well, then maybe that'll help. So because I remember when I looked at the score, because I was walking past just while I was working, I saw the TV a couple of times, saw a score, and I was like, oh, maybe they're not as good, and Dan Houston's team's not adding as much, and they went, oh wait, Dan Houston's not even fucking playing, so we don't get a full idea of what they can do with Dan Houston until they play us, which is an interesting proposition and a stressful one for me. Side note, I've been getting more and more pissed off about the fact that Dan Houston's gone to Collingwood over the course of the summer. Like the more I see,
I can sympathise with you. Yeah,
it's fucking.
I just think it just comes down to losing good people from your club that you've put a lot of time and effort into. And I think to
the
a
fact
lot of
he
people,
went to them too, like that's
that never makes things easier. But I think the um, somewhat of a rug pull. Not so much the 5AA comments that he made, because no one believed him when he said it anyway. It was more the fact for me that, I think I said it last year, rookie selections generally stay loyal. But it was more the fact that he'd just been put into the leadership group and he'd signed a 3-year deal. What was it, the year before or whatnot? And then
because he still had 2 or 3 years to run on the deal that at the end of last season. So we had a decent amount of leverage, and obviously in the AFL leverage is a little bit funny. It's not the same as international sports, but
So then it was like, oh, okay, and then I was leaving, and another team gets to enjoy his talent, which, obviously there's the flip side argument to it, and we're more than happy to take other teams' players. But I feel that we've mentioned it before. I feel that we're taking players who more often than not haven't proved themselves yet, and then we get the best out of them. That seems to be the trend. Whereas, Dan Houston's obviously a proven commodity, being a dual All-Australian, and we have to see him go, albeit I think that, and I think a few members of Port Adelaide Football Club have mentioned, I think we've got a pretty good return on that trade and the draft ensuing after it. We won't see the fruits of that labour, though, entirely in the short term, although I think we'll see some of it for sure, and particularly this weekend. But more often than not, you have to wait for the returns on those trades and the drafts picks that you may pick up. I'm not any less upset about it now than I was when it happened, for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing, is I think I've somehow worked myself up to be more upset about it now. I don't know why. It's just like,
and I hope we make his life very difficult. This weekend we need to make a stand as a football club. Fair enough, you want to leave, that's a professional game, but once we're on the field, you're an opposition player, and I hope we do not afford him the space and the luxury to run around and kick a long bomb that we've had the pleasure to view on our side of the fence in years gone by, and most notably recent years.
I hope if they try the set play that we did a lot, and they did in preseason against Richmond, where he handball off 50.
I hope Sampao, Pepper, DBJ are just staring him in the eyes and just waiting there for the opportunity to take him down.
We've got a game plan that kind of just has a wrinkle to it that is just like someone's always watching for that, depending on your angle, and just someone's ready to just lay a good fair hip and shoulder on him, and just make sure that shot doesn't get off, whether it be whatever. Just make sure that one doesn't get off. I'd hate to see that against us in his debut game for the club. I think
absolutely,
as part of it, there's a little bit just now that he's gone, it's just like his last act for us as a club was like that showdown moment against Rankin, and then obviously we did ultimately miss him against Sydney in that prelim. So it's like it's a sour note to end on as well, which is so. I do hope we give him a little bit of, obviously fair, and Dan, I'm not besmirching Dan Houston as a person. This is purely just sports fan tribalism that I'm going with at the moment. But I do hope we give him a little bit of niggle, and it's just a little bit of fun out there, and we make sure he knows that he left
you're playing for someone else now.
And that he left a club that's pretty tight.
The show goes on. It's just the way it is.
Absolutely. Their injury report is interesting because the other question is, and I guess we can start going through the lines, and we should start with their defense, because I think that's where I was going to start with the injury report, because Dacos is a test for this week. Josh Dacos, I should say. Josh Dacos is a test for this week. I think he's rolled an ankle or something like that last week. Because there is the question of where Dan Houston comes into the side. I was assuming someone I don't know the side well enough to work out who would, but they've thrown Harry Perryman. They've got a few they've thrown a few new recruits back there already into the defense, and where assume like Dacos and Houston and Josh Dacos. I need to say Jay Dacos every time I say Dacos. Like the Josh and Dan kind of link up run out of defense is meant to be the kind of one of the things that and there was a little bit of that in the Richmond game in preseason. I did watch a little bit of Collingwood Richmond in the preseason a few weeks ago because I wanted to see how Dan was looking, which may be why I'm so fucking bitter about it, because I just had to I actually watched him in Collingwood colours and it just fucking rammed it home for me. But yeah, Josh Dacos is a test. I think they're expecting that he'll play, but it is also interesting that that they've not flagged. They're not saying that he's available. That they're genuinely like, we need to see how he comes up over the next couple of days. So, yeah, how do you feel about the kind of defensive line? I mean, do we assume that Dan Houston plays with Dacos? And I'm just looking at their name aside from last week and seeing Reef McInnes' name down in halfback, and I'm just like, I don't think. But yeah, we assume Dan.
I mean, so looking at their defensive line,
their defensive line versus our forward line, I guess, is probably the way to start, as we did last. Yeah.
So they've got some proven commodities in Maynard, Moore, and Quainer. Interesting backline in the fact that our forward line is going to be very different to how it has been. It may prove a very good matchup, but like you said,
I'm of a similar opinion that
Perryman's been thrown back there, and I think he went there kind of wanting to spend some time in the midfield. Funnily enough, everyone in the AFL community didn't think that was actually going to fucking happen, because I don't think Perryman's a midfielder. And I am dirty that we've gone after him twice and he hasn't come twice. Josh Dacos is a winger for me. So, yeah, he lined up at halfback on the team list last week. If we can nullify Moore, I think Darcy Moore is most exposed when you're making him be accountable. Obviously, any loose type intercepting defender doesn't like to be made accountable. So that's where you would hope a Lukosius would keep him busy, because I think that's probably the matchup that is most likely. And then you've got Maynard and Quaynor spending a bit of time potentially on, your Sam Powell Peppers of the world. It'll be interesting to see how Richards, with a bit of inside knowledge on these guys, how he reacts in that forward system.
Yeah, it's a good point.
May be beneficial to us.
We've talked about Dan Houston debuting against his old club, like Joe Richards, being that he's had the good
more than likely.
Going, when we're not, obviously. And I should say now, for those listening, I'm going to start doing on the Patreon, so sign up for the Patreon if you haven't already. When team lists drop on whatever night it is, I assume it'll be Thursday this week, when squads drop, I'll do a quick just podcast on the Patreon and Jamie will join me if time permits. We plan for the Tuesday every week to do the usual podcast for everyone. Thursday will be, or whenever squads drop, will be me and Jamie, depending on schedules, because Jamie does incredibly well to give me just hours of his time each week as it is. So, but yeah, we'll talk about squads when they drop. But assuming that Joe Richards is named, as we're kind of assuming at the moment, he will be making his debut as well. And it's a very interesting point you make, because I think he kind of probably what intel he can bring might be a little bit for what he's doing and for how our forward line is changing, might be a little bit more integral than what Dan Houston can tell Collingwood about us. And it could be a purely biased point of view, but and maybe I honestly think intel that a former player brings over is overdone anyway. But just Joe Richards has looked good in preseason, and as you said, like Darcy Moore, their defense isn't one of those ones that worries me as much, particularly with what I'm seeing from what our forward line is doing, the dynamism of it. I think there's holes to exploit there, because they're not a stalwart defense. There's and Darcy Moore probably had a down year last year as well, so he's got a lot of expectation on his shoulders, and he certainly their defense wasn't wasn't put up and wasn't glowing last week either, because part of the reason they lost that game was because they allowed so much fairly easy score for GW.
Transition was way too easy from some. I didn't watch the game more than a couple of snippets, but some of their pressure up the field looked pretty poor. And as we've discussed plenty of times, I think our defense looks very poor when there is poor pressure up the field. And that's the way it looked from my point of view in regards to Collingwood against the Giants.
Mm-hmm. And the fitness thing is an interesting side note too, because this is my worry is that, like, you know, Dacos, Nick now, the whole cramping issue on last weekend will be sorted by this week, and, you know, he's going to have a fucking great game probably. But, I guess defensively, just to cover off on that, like, how do you feel that there's do you feel confident in it? Like, I mean, I know we're talking about new offensive.
I mean, we haven't even we haven't even mentioned Mitch Georgiadis, Willie Rioli. HORNE-FRANCIS will be either starting or resting there at various stages through the game. Like, we've focused on a couple of people that might give him issues, but then we haven't even mentioned some of our two leading goalkeepers from last season. Yeah. So will Moore match up on Lukosius, or will he match up on Georgiadis? Now that I say that, you probably have to go Georgiadis, which poses another threat because their defense is fairly small defense. Darcy Moore is probably their tallest defender, and if not, most accomplished in that role. So it definitely poses an interesting battle and a good chance for us to put on some pain if we can get our system right and get it to our forwards in the correct manner, or the manner that we want to, and what we've been talking about all pre-season.
Yeah, and that's not even mentioning, you know, if Ollie Lord gets a shot as well. I'm not sure whether selection's going.
Probably unlikely at this point, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah, he did.
But it's a good point.
He did look okay, but in the internal, I was like okay with. But yeah, I'm not sure if he's quite ready for a round one start. But there's the point being, there's a lot of options. Like, I just the Lukosius looking promising in preseason. Obviously, Georgiades just being Georgiades. Like, he's just ready to go to another level this year, I think. And then just a plethora of small forwards suddenly, that because of the promising signs of Richards. Very obviously, Pau Pepper being back to a fairly good match strength, and Willie Rioli just carrying on from last year, who we both agree he had a really good year last year. An injury spell aside, it's a forward line that spells a lot of, I think, danger signs for what Collingwood are doing both last year and early signs this year. So midfield battle's an interesting one. I know we've started kind of the opposite end of the field. We usually go the other way, but I think, let's go midfield now, and we can finish off on defense, just to do something different to start the year.
Well, defense is probably more of an interesting topic in regards to support, so I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Midfield, I mean, it's entirely dependent on, but again, Nick Dacos wasn't in their injury report at all, so it was just cramp. He just the pickle juice couldn't go down quick enough. So we're assuming, the midfield is going to be what we saw last weekend, which is your old stalwarts of the likes of Pendlebury's and side bottoms through the middle there, and Chris. I think Jack Crisp is playing his 250th this weekend as well. Which, but obviously, I guess we should just shout out.
I think he just played it.
Oh, did he? I thought he was this weekend for some reason.
Unless he was a late out, but I'm looking at the fixture from Sunday, and it has 250th.
Okay, that's my bad. That just shows how much I give a shit about Collingwood, though. Because
that's good.
It was in my head. I know one thing. Darcy Byrne-Jones plays his 200th this weekend. By the way, shout out to Darcy Byrne-Jones.
True.
So let's hope we get it done for Darcy, and he will be another interesting part of the forward line for us too. But yeah, moving to the midfield. Obviously, we're without Butters, but it's the one spot on the field that you and I have talked about often over the last year and a bit of doing this podcast together, that it's the one area of the field that we're strong. And as I said at the start of the podcast, it's the one area of the field that, internal trials or not, we are fucking raring to go, because we're injuring each other in internal trials. So these guys are ready to go out and battle. And one of the things with just this midfield of theirs, it's such an interesting thing because you've got Nick Dacos is obviously the young star and everything like that, but otherwise it's quite an aging group. And
Interesting, yeah.
part of the slowness of ball movement, I think, is just a little bit a part of that. Particularly last weekend, I didn't get to see the full match against GWS. I tried to watch them. I watched some highlights and I tried to watch the KO mini, but kept on getting interrupted by just life things. But yeah, it's it looked a little bit stodgy through the middle, which is obviously probably not helped by a little bit of stodginess coming off a halfback as well. And again, we don't know what Dan Houston's going to add to this as well, so it's still an unknown proposition. But just yeah, though they were beaten in clearance last week, and their contested ball was pretty good, but they were beaten from the clearances. And they had their full complement of players, and maybe the clearance numbers, without knowing what they were at halftime. I don't know if they were affected by a little bit of Dacos's cramp through the second half or whatever. But yeah, it's a midfield that, while full of star names, certainly didn't cover itself in glory last weekend, and is an aging midfield. And whereas our midfield, the oldest guy, I mean, Travis Spoke, is not part of our midfield group really anymore. He's involved in some of that, but
yeah, he's a winger.
Yeah, the oldest one
maybe
in our
different
midfield
again.
group is Ollie Wines, who's only a few years removed from the Brownlow medal, and he's still the senior guy. That's not, the main guys are your Willem Drews, your Connor Rosies, and in this game, obviously Butters is not playing this game, but Rosie, Jason Horne-Francis, Willem Drew, assisted by the likes of Ollie Wines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's 3 young gun midfielders entering, still not even quite at prime years yet. Yeah, I just think that the win is there. It's the between the years thing we saw last year. They can get beaten when the things aren't clicking right, but
yeah,
I think they're just,
and there's evidence in that regard against Collingwood.
Yeah.
Over the last couple of years. Like, unfortunately, when the heat has turned up and the crowd's got more involved, our midfield has kind of wilted a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, regardless of the talent that's in it. So it's funny. I think the midfield that we come up against this weekend is not too dissimilar to the one that we've come up against the last couple of times. And yeah, if we can, and hopefully we learn those lessons, because I think you mentioned Pendlebury and Sidebottom. I mean, Lipinski to a lesser extent. If we have the ability to probably run rings around them, but it's actually putting it into practice, which has failed us the last couple of times. We've just kind of succumbed to a bit of pressure that they've, to their credit, turned up in game on both occasions. So that'll be an interesting point, because I'm fairly confident that our midfield can absolutely take it for the reasons that you mentioned. The wings will be an interesting battle as well, with Jace Burgoyne probably assuming that role based on his preseason form. Where the other wing will land, Boak, Drew will probably get rotated. There'll be a mixture of players. Jackson Mead will probably get a chance in the absence of Butters. So it's just how well we handle the heat, but then also defensively, what we apply to them in transition, because premiership sides win off the back of turnover, for and against. So we need to mitigate the pain that we haven't been able to the last couple of years. And alternatively, we need to stack on the pain at a more consistent level than we have done for the last couple of matchups against Collingwood at the G. I have full confidence that they can do it. They just need to put it in practice.
Yeah, no, absolutely agreed. It's one of those things that's just like, on paper you go, we can do this, but then you look at the actual evidence of the last couple of years, and as you said, when the pressure comes, the kind of pressure cooker of the MCG and that rolling noise of the fans and that
early in the season too.
Yeah, and this is going to be Collingwood fan.
That plays a part. I don't know. I'm a nuffy. Sorry to cut you off again, but yeah.
I know you're good. But no, you're right, because it is early in the season. It's particularly Collingwood fans' home opener. They're coming off a loss, so there's going to be, but they're still going to be buoyant, because I think if you're a Collingwood fan that looked at that game, you kind of go, well, there's a lot of things that went wrong for us in that game that probably shouldn't happen again. That's how I'd look at it objectively if I was like a Collingwood fan. And yeah, it's a Saturday night footy at the MCG. Like, yeah, that's going to be a pressure cooker of an environment, and that's probably a good point to bring up, is that we have wilted when that noise of affirmation from the Collingwood fan base in particular at the MCG, and really any, like, the MCG is just not a ground we've played well. Limited opportunity, of course, but you know, even that again, you reminded me of that Essendon game took place at the MCG. It's just like, yeah, we got ourselves into a position to win that game, and
made it hard.
Then made it hard. Yeah, again, weather was a factor there too, but it's just we didn't manage the
situation. Flat.
Yeah, we didn't manage the situation well, and we didn't manage the situation well against Collingwood over the past couple of years. Even when we got ourselves into a position to put ourselves into a winning position last year, we let it roll away pretty damn quickly again. So
pretty poorly.
Yeah, that will be that's one of those unknown things, is like, you can go on paper like this group should be able to match up well with these guys that are got a lot more mileage in the legs, but yeah, it's all about the between the ears stuff, and that's where the guys like Pendlebury and stuff do add the value, is they've got the experience to just calmly, like, you know, I remember playing tennis against some old blokes from local town when I was younger, and it was just like I could power the ball, but they just knew where to be before I.
Yeah,
you know, it was just like
it's the intricacies.
Yeah, you can be as powerful as a player as you want to be, but you know, if the opposition player just knows where to be, you know, a couple of steps quicker than you do, then it doesn't fucking matter. They're gonna beat you anyway. So, yeah, that'll kind of be the intriguing part of that midfield battle. Will really be kind of the raw talent that we have that is still building.
Yeah,
versus,
and that's
yeah.
I'm looking towards Ollie Wines and Connor Rozee.
I mean, he's
in this game.
Yeah,
he's a skipper. He needs to set the tone. Ollie Wines is obviously a well-accomplished, hard-nosed midfielder. He's a contested beast, so he needs to set the tone from a internal point of view, in the contest, that is. But then the third aspect to that is Willem Drew, considering the week that Nick Dacos has just had. Willem Drew needs to help double down on that and not give him room to come back into the season at this point in time.
Yeah.
He needs to. Dacos obviously had a rough week. He didn't light the world on fire on Sunday. And for mine, Drew has to clamp him down. And without Butters, it provides more of an opportunity for Drew to go to work in that regard. We have the flexibility, whereas the funny thing is when we do have a Butters in, we can, get a bit full in the midfield, and rotations can be a bit of a struggle in efforts to do one particular task, and tagging being the topic. Not having Butters there may, in my opinion, give Drew a better opportunity to have that task at hand. And I mean, I called for tags a lot last year, mostly because we love Willem Drew and they didn't come to fruition. But for my opinion, when teams or players are under the hammer a little bit, I'd prefer us to continue that rather than be a point of change, for that player, Nick Dacos being that player in this instance. We need to double down on his pain.
Yeah. Just run around, just shouting pickle juice as you're chasing him down.
Sounded like Beetlejuice for a second there. So did you say pickle juice enough? Does like pickle rip appear or something?
Yeah, or just a jar of like crispy pickles. Like I'm a big proponent for just chomping on
a pickle.
I love a pickle. In college, a buddy of mine, Shay, got me into doing picklebacks for a whiskey shot as well, like cheap whiskey.
Right.
Just do it like a shot of pickle.
Instead of like a lemon, sucking on a lemon. You just
it's just like literally.
Juice.
And this is just how much of degenerate me and my buddies were in college. We rent like the little bar that was near the apartment complex in Eugene, Oregon. We ran them out of like. They came out like we had a college football Saturday. We were just drinking. Like, we just did whiskey shots all day. And they came out and just showed us the empty jars of pickle juice. Like they'd run out of pickle juice in the bar. Like all their jars of pickles they had for pickles for the burgers, they'd run out of pickle juice. And a pickle a pickle chaser, pickle juice chaser for whiskey just cuts off that bite. And good whiskey, you don't need it, but like we were doing well whiskey because we were college students, so
Yeah.
it's bad
College.
whiskey,
Yeah.
very 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 fiery taste at the end, and so you need the pickle juice just cuts that fire right off. And as a fan of pickles as I am, I didn't mind the flavor either. So never cramped in college.
Yeah. Wow. No pickle juice left for Nick Dacos. Let's hope.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. If Nick Dacos was playing at Autzen Stadium in Oregon, he'd be struggling because I'd have run him out of pickle juice. We'll get through it because we've gone pretty long already, which is just normal. But defensively is probably as you said, as we're getting into the midfield, probably the intriguing part of our side and has been all off season. But also kind of the forward line that Collingwood offers, obviously with some additions to the side, but it's still just an interesting proposition in what we. And we haven't even mentioned, by the way, Jordan Ngowi's just not going to be. He won't be playing.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
one that's out from that midfield rotation and forward line as well. But they brought in Membry. Brody Myercheck's there, who had a fucking Buddy Franklin game against us for about a quarter and a half last year. But it's a forward line that objectively doesn't, as much as Bobby Hill's great. Lockie Schultz remains to be seen. Like, he should probably still be a lot of good years ahead for them. So it's a forward line that does provide some worry. But again, it's like they haven't shown the reasons to be worried about them yet. I was Tim Membry drop a couple of just marks he should have taken last weekend. There was one where I think there might have been Dacos actually that just fired a really nice like good targeted dart into the chest, and Membry just fucking fumbled it. Yeah, but we're also obviously with that. By the way, injury report: Brandon Thatcher suddenly is 7 to 9 weeks now. Did you notice that today?
Yeah. Yeah. He must have really fucking done a number on his back. Apparently, he was in the gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of just protecting myself and not expecting him to be back for the whole year.
That's where I'm at.
I'm just putting it out there. Yeah. I seriously hope that because back injuries are precarious at the best of times. And from what I think it was Chad Corns may have mentioned in one of his press conferences, that it was just an accident in the gym. Who knows what Zerk Thatcher was attempting to do, but it's ominous, and it sucks.
It really
because of how we think. Yeah, he had a good season in our opinion last year, and looking forward to how that manifested now that he's settled. But disappointing all the same, and a bit of a worry, to be honest. Hopefully it doesn't offer any long-term issues to him.
Do you think so? The other probably before we get into actually how the defensive matchup might work, are you thinking Asava is going to be back this week? Because they still seem to be giving him a chance, but I just don't think it's worth taking that risk if he's not even a guarantee at this. Like, we're recording on a Tuesday.
No, I don't think. Yeah. It's promising that he's a chance, in my opinion. And I mean, in our preview, I still think we need to give him a good go in the defensive system that we recruited him for. There's no point throwing the baby out with the bathwater after 1 year. And we mentioned that he went forward in part as on a needs basis last year. So putting that to one side, I don't expect him to come in this week. And then when you look at the forwards that, we might be matching up against, while we were talking before, I looked up just some player comparisons, and in terms of height, and McStay, I believe, is at 196 without going back on what I did before. But then Membry's just under 190. And Myercheck, I think, is just over 190. And when you think that Alira is mid 190s, Ryan Burton is 191, and then your Logan Evans, I don't know where I got my tongue tied there, and Miles Bergman, they're around the 188, 189 without having mentioned, Finlayson has been
Yeah.
spending time in there as a taller option. All of a sudden, our lack of key position depth doesn't seem as dire when Daniel McStay, who in my opinion is being overpaid at Collingwood,
Yeah.
and is yet to really prove himself as a key position forward. Um, I think from a matchup point of view, if you're looking at height, I think we've got it covered. It's just the system and how well we match up. Again, that could be up the field as well. How easy is the ball coming in to our defensive line? Because I fully trust the likes of Miles Bergman. Evans has had a fantastic preseason by all accounts, from behind the scenes kind of comments. But it's just where Finlayson in relation to, say, an Aliir as the two tallest players, because, yeah, look, I imagine that Finlayson would get selected and be put into that defensive line. He's spent the last couple of games there in our preseason. So that would suggest to me that that's probably where he's going to be pegged early doors in lieu of our key position outs.
Yeah. I think that's what the Port Adelaide media lines. I mean, since they debuted him in the defense, it's been, you had the Logan Evans interview where he mentioned, oh, this is, Finlayson's been asking a lot of questions, working with us down back, and like how really acting like he's he's a veteran, but he's asking all the questions and the right questions, and then even just at the internal trial, watching him match up on Mitch, it's just like, this is what Finlayson has been, and I don't think it was the case before pre-BZT injury, obviously, but I think the fact that those things happened early enough and BZT closely followed by Asava, I think, as far as timeline goes, I think it happened early enough in the preseason that it allowed Port Adelaide to go. Because probably Port Adelaide might have been going, don't know exactly where Finlayson's fitting at the moment. He's probably just going to be like a depth squad player, maybe play a bit of sub, or he's going to be, forward line depending on what our mix goes. But they had enough time to go, oh shit, we need, this, he has played defense, and BZT's out for fucking, as we said, maybe a year. We don't know. Like, we should start maybe as soon as BZT had a back injury that was undefined as far as timeline goes, they might have at that point gone, let's start working on Finlayson down in defense, and all the media and everything since, and even just watching myself with my own right in front of me match up on Finlayson, a match up on Georgiades at the internal trial the other night. It's like, it's very clear where Finlayson's role is in the Port Adelaide side in 2025, and Aliir, touch wood, quite fit at the moment, and it's really only BZT and Nasava that are the worries injury wise. The actual fleet of smaller or medium to talls essentially is what you were saying before. They're all fit and raring to go, and young and lean and mean. I mean, Burton's getting on. I always think of Burton as a young player, but he is actually 28 now. I think you said a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, but beyond that,
he's in his late 20s, and to be honest, unfortunately, I don't have full confidence in Burton.
Starting to get to the point that like the ship's. I think he's a good utility, but I'm just as far as like a key.
Yeah, and I think it's mostly body. I don't think it's because of his want or his endeavor or any of those things. I think it's just a lot of leg injuries have just brought him down a few pegs. He doesn't have that explosive power like he once had years ago. Look,
as Indiana Jones,
he may.
Said to Marion on the submarine or the ship or whatever, it's not the years, honey, it's the mileage. And that's the Ryan Burton. Like, it's,
And I mean, he's 190. He's over that 190 centimeter mark, which could be helpful. But in saying that, he has also been matched up against small forwards such as Charlie Cameron and still done a good job. So it's an interesting mix. It's probably the biggest interest for me in terms of team selection later in this week, because when you take into account that McStay is their tallest forward and he is probably a bulkier forward, my check somewhat bulky, but still a bit shorter, who's going to take that matchup? Because I can't imagine Finlayson coming into defensive line late in the piece, and B, being a fairly not unaccountable, but he likes to roam free. I can't imagine him being the number one defender, so that would probably leave Aliir to be a lockdown defender in this instance. But as we know, that's not his most optimal position.
But then maybe we saw Bergman play a little bit of that. Was it Bergman on Tex in the? So maybe, it's an interesting mix of who gets to float a little bit more and who, because Bergman likes it. Bergman's really
I'm comfortable with Bergman on a Membry or a Myercheck for sure. It's just McStay has that little bit more height.
The height
and a little bit more bulk to him, which would suggest to me that we'd probably want one of our taller guys on him.
Which is basically Aliir.
And we have exactly. Yeah. The two tall guys that we have perform best, while Finlayson's a small sample size, they both perform best being a bit of a looser, more distributor type. But I still have faith in Aliir being a lockdown. I said in one of our preview shows that I think that he still relishes those opportunities when they're presented to him, and he would do whatever he needs to. The perception is from outside that he doesn't want to be a lockdown defender. Which I don't necessarily agree with. I think his optimal position is a looser general type, but I still have faith that he can do the job as a genuine lockdown.
Yeah, and I think, and to that point that you're making, again, we've had such a long preseason now of knowing that Thatcher's not going to be available and Asava as well, that they're going to work with Aliir, and I'm sure, and again, you made the point, like Aliir is very voluntary about what he needs to do for the side. He's a team orientated player. He wanted to play defense. Now, what his role in that defense, he probably flourishes in certain roles that we've given him because we've had the freedom to give him, but he's still going to be happy to do a job if it is to be more lockdown rather than the role that, he won an All-Australian Blazer from doing that ultimate role that we love to see him doing. But if by needs basis he needs to do a little bit more lockdown, stay-at-home stuff, he's going to do that because that's what he wanted to do. Like he wanted to be he wanted to play a role.
He wanted to be a defender. Yeah.
Now, what that defender role he got that got into an All-Australian Blazer was something that within the Port Adelaide system we were able to make happen. But being a lockdown stay-at-home defender on one player a little bit more, and still maybe depending on how the game, because that's the thing.
That's it. Yeah.
Games are their own storybook that happen, and sometimes, depending on the games happening, you might still get to do a little bit of that. It just
absolutely. Yeah.
So, just having your core role and then seeing what you can do outside of that. We don't know, but it probably will. It's going to necessitate him doing a little bit more of that than what he was, because what he was doing early in his Port Adelaide career was when I'm trying to think now. Like it was, Trent McKenzie was still like Trent McKenzie, and he like this is. It seems so long ago now, but Trent McKenzie...
Talking about small defensive lines.
Like Trent McKenzie and Aliir were like those two as a defensive partnership were like really good.
Yeah.
Like so much has changed, and Aliir's aware of that, and that I have full confidence. I have more confidence now in what we can do defensively against Collingwood than I probably did a month ago. I still do have worries because Lockie Schultz, I still expect to flourish. I think he's.
And like a Will Hoskin-Elliott always tends to fucking have his best game of the season against us.
Yeah.
Like that type of shit is always kind of there on the table.
Bobby Hill's a player, obviously. Like they've got talent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we haven't. That's not even mentioning like Jamie Elliott being able to do what he can do. So
there's
talent in abundance down there.
So this system is the great unknown because like you mentioned, and we've said like our small forward line, like the trends of the game are going towards small forward lines at this point in time. So we need to obviously pay attention to their small forwards, like you mentioned. Lockie Shaw still hasn't proven himself en masse, but we know what he's capable of. Bobby Hill's probably the biggest threat. Jamie Elliott's getting on in his career. So who goes to them? Obviously, we got Lockie Jones and And then, yeah, you've got more unknowns in Josh Sin, although we all expect him to probably do quite well, hopefully. Kane Farrell will want to be rebounding. Yeah, so yeah, it's really
It's a
really intriguing for me.
battle of styles and that's football. But yeah, it is like, can our style and what we want to do with our defense in this new game plan that we're building override what the talent they've got down there, and then just being able to do the lockdown things we need to do to to null their offensive. And again, like we've said often last year, it'd come down to a little bit of that pressure up the field, being able to nullify a lot of that. Because if there's
Absolutely.
coming in, it doesn't fucking matter anyway. It's just yeah.
Yeah, a lot rests on the midfield in that regard.
Yeah, yeah. I know we talked about it on the end, then we'll close off on this now and then get into the awards and then close off for the night. But we talked about this game on the Eddie Corns podcast a month and a half ago now, actually, almost 2 months ago. Jeez, it's gone quick. And shout out to Eddie, doing great things. We both were kind of like, this is a loss to start the season. Has that changed for you, or are you still pretty much there?
I'm still preparing for a loss, just considering that it's our first hit out for the year away at the G for some of the reasons that we spoke about before. Collingwood obviously getting a rocket up them as well after a pretty poor performance as a whole. So I'm preparing for a loss. I really, really hope that we're competitive and we make it a contest, which I think is something that you mentioned on that on Eddie's podcast. Is we just don't want to be blown out of the water again like we have for the last couple of times we've been there.
Yeah,
make it a contest, give ourselves a chance to win, because like we've just mentioned, across the lines, the matchups seem to be well, as long as we've got our system in some sort of working order. So in that regard, we can absolutely take it off them. Something that we didn't mention just quickly at the end is that Darcy Cameron actually had a pretty bloody good game for Collingwood against the Giants. But then alternatively, I have pretty high hopes for Jordan Sweet this
we didn't
season.
Even the rocks, did we?
yeah. Like Jordan Sweet looks like he's put on a bit of size, but leaned up in certain areas at the same time, funnily enough. And his preseason has looked good, from my opinion. If last year's rise continues, that could be a very tantalizing matchup. They're both fairly similar players as well, in their kind of body shape and the way they roam around the ground. So,
there's been a lot said about Lloyd Meek this week with his performance over Sydney on the weekend, and he was another kind of diamond in the rough kind of player that was just stuck in the depths of depth lists at other teams. And Jordan Sweet's kind of hopefully on that trajectory as well. He was just a very, very a very good to great ruckman that was just behind the depth chart. I was thinking, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was actually thinking about that when I was listening to one of the, I can't remember which footy podcast I was listening to earlier today, but Lloyd Meek was being talked about a lot, and just how the fuck did this player just go undiscovered, and now he's like, just a real great player for Hawthorn. And I was just thinking, this is kind of how I feel about Jordan Sweet, and I'm hoping long way to continue.
He's just going about his business.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Darcy Cameron, just the team stats was 47 hitouts to 23 over GWS, despite the fact they lost that game. So I think I mentioned earlier that I thought GWS won the clearances, but they actually lost it. So I might have had that back to front earlier. I'm just looking at it again and just remembering what I said earlier. But it does provide an intriguing good test early for Jordan Sweet. And you're right, he does look good and a little bit bulkier. Like there's a few ball players that are just added that little bit of lean.
An extra layer.
Yeah. But Sweet, another one I didn't mention because, again, internal trial didn't have too much fruit to bear for in-depth analysis, but just general vibes. Jordan Sweet was looking nice. He's an imposing figure, which is not something I thought of with Jordan Sweet when he came over, more than 12 months ago. But 12 months ago, I never thought of Jordan Sweet as an imposing figure. But now, just the way he carries himself and the body he has now, even though he still looks lean and lanky overall because he's a tall ruckman, he does have that bit of bulk. And just, I think having, this is the benefit of being Port fans and having watched him last year, but he just kind of some of that attitude he carries now. Like I have a new, there's a little bit of little bit of mongrel that Jordan Sweet plays with, despite the fact.
Yeah, he probably proved a few things to himself more than anything last year as well, which is
confidence is
in a sporting sense. Yeah, absolutely. Once you prove a few key performance indicators to yourself and you're confident in those, yeah, your game can turn around exponentially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So excited for the game this weekend. Obviously, we're both a little bit trepidatious about what the result might be, but I think, as you mentioned, and what I said a few weeks back on Eddie's podcast, and generally maybe expecting a loss, but if we're competitive, then I'll be okay heading into round 2, even if we're 0-1. If we're competitive, and if we're competitive, that gives us a chance to win, which you never know what can happen. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, can't wait to be back to reviewing games, win or lost, when it comes next week. That brings us to the end of the podcast, which will be ended by, I say this brings us to the end of the podcast, and then I'm going into another segment, but it is the close of the podcast, and it's a little bit of fun. As people remember from last year, we had a few award segments, which we're going to do again this year, and I'm going to be a lot more organized with it this year because I have a system to make sure that I can do it properly. But yeah, we had goal of the week last year, which we've selected a goal of the year. We also had the Sweeney Award last year, which, to explain that, was based on a meme of Sydney Sweeney from the YouTube show, or whatever show it is, Hot Ones, where she's eating wings and is just looking very, very lovingly and starry-eyed up to the skies, I guess. And we took that meme and made it a thing about the things that give us the warm and fuzzies, and just good feelings in every game. So we called it the Sweeney last year. We are going to be renaming it this year to something more in perpetuity, to be able to keep it as a
more
name.
Permanence.
Yes, exactly. We do have a short list of names that we've discussed, that I'm going to be putting up a poll probably on Saturday leading into the game. But for those listening, Jamie, I'll let you tell us what the short list of names are and what we discussed earlier.
Okay, so first preview of the shortlist of names. Yeah, okay.
So might as well do it on air.
Yeah, had a brief discussion offline, but basically, ultimately, the Sweeney Award is the essence of football. Like Dave said, what makes you smile at a game, just some of the intricate feats that players tend to display, excluding goals, we must say.
Because we do a goal of the year award as well. So
obviously we do a goal of the week, and even if we didn't do a goal of the week, you could imagine a lot of goals taking up some real estate and things that make us feel good because it's obvious. So things around that, think defensive efforts, think kicks across the body, run down tackles, JHS Gaelic solo to himself against Carlton at Adelaide Oval last year. So the Essence of Football is one of the names on the shortlist, the Essence of Football Award. The other name that we have is a dual dedication to a couple of players in the AFL era of Port Adelaide, one being Michael Wilson, a favourite of ours for his tenacity, attacking flair on the contest, that is, and Robbie Gray for his magic overall, and more centred towards the attack. So the Wilson Gray Award is the second option. And then, as a bit of a contradiction to a message I was going to write, Dave, the Chad Corns Award is the third option, because Chad Corns quite simply did it all in his AFL career. He was a forward, he was a back, he even played in the guts in the latter stages of his career, and had highlights aplenty in his own right. So Essence of Footy, the Wilson Gray, or the Chad are our shortlist for now. So I look forward to seeing what the listeners and those who follow us on social media, where their kind of thoughts lie in regards to that shortlist. But I'm looking forward to landing a name that we can run with for years to come.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As you mentioned to me when we started talking about it, it's just like the Sweeney was like a good thing in the time, but it quickly ran out of legs. So it would be fun to have a name that is more centered on Port Adelaide and evokes the spirit of the award. But yeah, to announce the first one for this year, the awards for 2024, and we'll go with the Sweeney first, and as it was known as last year within the Sweeney, but we will, in the history books, it will get its revision name, but maybe with a little asterisk just to shine a light on what it was at the time. we did a selection panel ourselves because I didn't get around. I had some technological issues with trying to get a package together in my move to do an online vote. But this year, what I'm going to do is I'll do monthly packages of the weekly awards and get people to vote on the monthly ones. And at the end of the year, each one that wins the monthly one will go into the yearly ballot, and people will vote on that. It'll be a lot easier to keep track of. So, but for last year, the Sweeney Award and the yet to be named of those three options goes to Miles Bergman's double tackle, which I think I even did a package on Instagram of like, and did like, I did a really shitty edit. I was just trying to do something. I'd never done the shaky video edit before, but with the Here Comes the Boom, but it did just a double tackle in that. It was kind of in that moment of the game where it was really turning.
An important moment.
Yeah.
Neat little ball here to Ollie Hollands. Back to Cripps. Takes him on. Not sure how he disposed of it. Hollands caught as well.
Well done, Bergman. That's two desperate tackles. Had Cripps running flat out at him.
And just like it was I should have noted who it was, but was Cripps one of the players that was involved in that? Or
He was, yeah.
It was. It was kind of that was the important part of the moment. It was like his star players that he's just taken down one and taken down another in a double tackle move that's just completely ripped momentum away from a little moment that Carlton were trying to build in the moment that we were trying to take the game away. And it was a defensive effort from a player that we love. We love Miles Bergman.
Yeah.
Please sign
Absolutely.
on. Please sign.
Jason Bergman.
Yeah. Jason that works at Credit Union SA, right? Like but yeah, I think a worthy winner of the first of those awards. I know I just texted you to that I have a short list, but I wanted to see your thoughts. And without Jamie knowing, he sent me a short list that was very similar to mine, but had the same one at the top, which I think it just shows that the kind of spirit of footy, kind of an essence of footy that you're talking about, kind of just is something that people know innately, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I was pretty confident of what you had at the top when I sent mine. So yeah, just going through them all again, it's hard to go past.
Yeah. The Lockie Jones ragdoll tackle was a good commentary moment, but the fact that Bergman,
as was that whole game that came from on the side note.
Yeah. I'm just Dwayne. There was but the Bergman one, just the fact that had that in that game that kind of against Carlton, the team that we'd had a previous pretty high profile, loss against, and the fact that we had a mini turnaround in the season in that game, and the fact that we
absolutely. Yeah, for sure. That was a signal of things to come.
Yeah, absolutely. So a worthy winner of the Sweeney for last year, and obviously yet to be named in perpetuity going forward. But Miles Bergman, the inaugural winner of the I guess we can just call it the Sweeney essence of Wilson Gray Corns Award. But I love that that's the first winner, because I think that's kind of one of those ones that's absolutely covers everything. It's stylish, it's flourish, it's good defensive pressure. It gives you makes you feel like those are the things that get you up and going in your seat. So I love that. I'll let you announce our goal of the year, because I know you know it, and because we've obviously discussed this off air, but I know that you and I have had extensive talks about this on the podcast when it happened, and it's just I think it's going to go down in the pantheon of just great Port Adelaide moments. But I'll let you take it away with our goal of the year winner for last year.
Yeah, I'd agree with that in terms of the posterity of it all. But and I'm sure it won't be of any surprise to anyone, but the goal of the year for 2024 was DBJ. Ole, ole, ole.
To play. Umpire throws it up. Byzantini, Meek wins it down. Drew the handball. Butters out of midfield. Need a mark. Ball goes inside 50. Who can take it? No one. Offhand, D'Ambrosio taps it backwards. They're under pressure. Ball comes out. He kicked it! He kicked it! He kicked it! I've never seen anything like it!
Like you mentioned, we spent a fair bit of time going over the latter stages of that game, albeit a frustrating game up until the latter stages of the game. But just the moment, the aftermath of it all, the commentary cycles or montages that you get to sink your teeth into after those moments of football. And thankfully, we were on the better side of it. T-shirt design that came out of it, thanks to Dave. And shout out to Patrick in Victoria, who has displayed it a few times in public. Yeah, just a fantastic goal. A goal that you hope for in football matches with mere seconds on the board, but never usually ends up happening. And like Jared Waitley said in the aftermath, you never really see a come from behind goal within gameplay like that. They're usually like a kick after the siren, but just the way everything unfolded was so captivating. And if Bergman tackle was hard to go past in a Sweeney sense, this was even more hard to go past in a goal of the year sense.
Yeah, it was one that we both kind of like. Maybe I led the jury a little bit. I was just like, I can't go past this one. And I had a look at some of the other ones from last year. I was just like, it's just the moment and the everything that was about it. Because I think it did. I mean, Hawthorn ultimately at that point we thought Hawthorn was still just like we weren't sure about who they were, but then
bit average.
It kind of added to what the semi-final was in the end was what we had happened before as well. There was a storyline that kind of developed through the year from that as well, because I don't think they may have lost one after that game. Like it was the run they went on was just incredible. So, and the commentary, like just fucking Timmy Ginniver just in the 5AA studios, just losing his mind. Like there's still a few seconds left. Go for another one.
Go for
percentage. Like, it's just like...
There's 2 seconds. Go for percentage. Get another one.
Just him.
It's classic.
Yeah, it's just full of such a great moment, and as we talked about at the time, just the finish. It's like beyond the moment. It's actually a great finish. Like the angle of it, the pressure. Like it's a split second decision moment. Like all the body things that go into making a finish happen. We had our soccer analogies at the time. I talked about Fernando Torres like hooking him in from like right of the box and just. Clearing whoever the fucking Man United keeper.
Yeah, well, that was part of our montage on the Creed in the aftermath.
Absolutely. But it was a really, really great finish beyond just the moment. I mean, he could have just tapped it in from right in front, but it was actually a difficult finish. He had to hook his boot.
Yeah,
and they talked about it afterwards that they practice those kind of things, and that's why the DBJ kind of thing happened after the game with the players. Is because they talk about these things and do these things, and the fact that they'd actually executed it on the field.
Yeah, it had come off. A once in a million opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Like, when are you ever going to get a moment where you can? It's a last minute winner in the 95th minute of a Premier League game kind of thing. Like, it's just the kind of that's what I said to you off air. Is like the celebrations were very reminiscent of winning a game at the death in soccer.
Limbs aplenty.
Limbs, absolute limbs. Yeah. So to have that kind of moment in an AFL game that, usually, I mean, we've seen our after the siren winners, obviously Robbie Gray, the most, or Dan Houston, the most recent one, but the most recent one we want to talk about now because of Dan Houston being Collingwood colours is Robbie Gray against Carlton in 2020. And there's absolute limbs there, but there's kind of like that, there's that lead in of the silence of waiting for him to take the kick. You don't get that in these moments with DBJ's goal. It is just
it's not pandemonium. It's pandemonium after it happens, but it's
kind of pandemonium. It's
just unbridled angst.
Yeah,
but you're just like, just do it, just do the thing, and then he did the thing.
Yeah, but then
so much tension.
Because as football fans, we know what we're looking for out of a centre square break. With 30 seconds to go and we're down by, what was it, 5 points? Like, it was a 1 point win in the end. So, we're down by 5 points.
Yeah.
We're looking for a mark. So, once it comes to ground, we're kind of like, oh, fuck. But then it's like bundling around and you're like, oh, okay, oh, shit. Like, it's just like the way it builds is like, because the thing that you're expecting to happen.
It's a wave of emotion.
Yeah, it's incredible. So, yeah, DBJ is absolutely a goal of the year for 2024. And, and he celebrates his 200th this week. And, despite some of the, much maligned nature of his career at Port Adelaide, I think he's an All-Australian. He's got that moment now, and he's been an absolute yeah, he's a workhorse for Port Adelaide and puts his and in preseason so far has been showing that he's got plenty to give as well. So, yeah, long may it continue. Alrighty, and that leaves us to the final part of the awards from last year, which is our Player of the Year counts. For both teams, our AFL men's and women's, we of course did have Player of the Week votes for our women's team as well. We'll do the men's first and then get to the women's. So I'm going to count back. So I've got the top 10 here. And I don't think the men's Player of the Year will be any surprise, but it actually closed up pretty close at the end. And I'll talk about that at the end. But in 10th place for our men's Player of the Year was Aliir, which I think is a good testament to the year that he had. He was on 21 points, which, as a reminder to anyone new, each week Jamie and I do 5-1 votes, with 5 being best on ground, 1 being our 5th best on ground, I guess, and we just get 5 players in our votes each week. So 5-1. So, yeah, it does get pretty extrapolated out to a lot of our stars getting a lot of votes. But I think what happens is a lot of players that do a lot of good efforts end up kind of picking up votes across the year, and I think that's a good testament to Aliir's year. Is like he's never going to be our best and fairest of those. You know, he is probably deserves to be right up there, but to be,
I think he's been on the podium. I think every year, since he came here.
Yeah, exactly. So he's he's one of my underrated favorite players of my Port fandom. He's just great. So the fact he snuck in, and it took him. He took into the last few weeks of the season to overtake actually Travis Boak in 10th, and when I did my count back of the votes. So, Aliir in 10th. In 9th, just a vote ahead with 22 votes was Miles Bergman. Again, probably someone who captured votes as his defensive efforts went up because it was the back end of the year that got him into the top 10 as well in the votes. And it was you were shouting it all year last year, get him more lockdown in defense, and then his game will flourish, and so because the votes came as his defensive effort came. So yeah, Miles Bergman in 9th. 8th with 31 votes, Mitch Georgiades, coming off an ACL, incredible year. Kicking goals. Increasing impact just around the field as the year went on, as his game kind of grew and he got the confidence in his body back and the ability to move around the field, but the core of it being his goal kicking. And after starting his career with a really good goal kicking record, kind of got the yips, did his ACL, came back, and has just been great since. And nothing about his preseason seems to lend otherwise that he'll be anything different than the Mitch Georgiades we hope and love. Oh, well, it's still got so much growth to come. 7th, Jace Burgoyne, 42 votes, just fucking flew into the top tier of the list as the year grew on.
Credit to him.
Yeah, and a couple of where he went from in the 20s in his votes into 42 was in the finals as well, because he had some great performances in finals. Obviously, I think we both gave him best on ground in the Hawthorn game, and he had a pretty good game in obviously a loss, unfortunately, but Sydney got votes from both of us as well. And yeah, he stepped up in moments, like the big moments, which was really, really a testament to his game. And he looks like he's going to be growing even more this year. You'll love this. 6th, Willem Drew, 49 votes from us last year. There's nothing more to say. You can give him
too low. It's too low.
I was about to say I'll give you 30 seconds, but you're already giving it to me. Yeah, it feels too low, doesn't it? And it feels even worse when I look at 5th on the list, which is our former number 5. Some guy, Lan Houston. I don't know. Name's a bit foggy to me now, but he was 5th with 56 votes. Willem Drew definitely should be above him now, and that's just hindsight's 2020. Anyway, who cares about that bloke? 82 votes, and now we're jumping up into the top tier because it's a big jump from 56 to 82. But Connor Rozee on 82 votes, considering the injury interrupted kind of weird middle of the year he had, a really, really, really strong year, which I think you and I kind of tried to recognise constantly on this podcast by highlighting some things that a lot of people don't highlight enough in his defensive efforts and just some of the overall things he does around the field. So 82 votes for Connor Rozee. A really good year considering the injuries and whatnot that happened in the middle of the year. Now we're getting to the top 3. 90 votes to Ollie Wines. Incredible year considering where he was probably a couple of years ago in that between Brownlow and between last year kind of realm he was in, injuries, preseason injuries, and just a little bit of where is his career now. He's now an integral part again of that unit as the veteran, and that top 3 finish highlights it. The top 2 is the same as it was probably the last time we talked about it, but it closed up a lot. So at the end of round 23, Zach Butters was on round 24. We had Zach Butters on 125 votes. Jason Horne-Francis was on 103. Now Zach Butters is our player of the year for last year, but he didn't get any votes in finals from us. He finished on 125. Jason Horne-Francis finished on 118.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
A hell of a lot, because at one point Butters was 30 odd ahead. Like, I just thought he was streaking away with it. And as the finals progressed and I tallied the votes. So yeah, congratulations to Zach Butters. He is our Creedcast player of the year for 2024, but it became a lot more close run thing than I was expecting when I was, when we were tallying the votes later in the year. I was thinking, Butters is running away with this, but yeah, it became pretty close, which is probably reflective, I think, of probably the impact of both of them last year in the end. Butters probably slightly shaded it in some areas, but there was those periods of the year where he was getting tagged, and but then Horne-Francis sometimes was in and out of games a little bit as his games developed. So it's probably reminiscent of the event, because they're both of them probably our most uniquely talented players that we have, I think. But yeah, Butters probably just shades it at the moment, but it just shows how quickly Horne-Francis is coming on. I think that he closed in that quickly at the end of the year. So yeah, it was really intriguing to count back through that and figure out the votes and see where it ended up. Yeah. I think quite reflective.
And it'll be in like regards to like a Jace Burgoyne of last year, it'll be interesting to see who kind of rises up the ladder this season as well. Yeah. And I expect a lot of those people to be there and thereabouts again. But yeah, there's always fresh stories to come out of any football season. So yeah.
There's guys like Logan Evans who ended up in the teens, even though despite only playing half a year, like he did get a few votes from us here and there, and he was down there. I can't remember exactly where he placed on the list because I did my top 10 and then had a look at the others. But there's it's a really who rises. Guys like Logan Evans are kind of like the ones that may be the ones that we look at. So Zach Butters, congratulations, AFL Men's Player of the Year for 2024 for the Creedcast. Moving on to the women's. This was a fun one to count back through too, because I hadn't actually done the weekly thing. I'd kept track. I had them all in a list of like weekly ones, but I actually had to do all the tallying leading into this podcast. So I did know who was. I just from remembering how our votes went across the year, it's pretty obvious. But we'll get to it. But in 10th, Julia Teakle with 15 votes. She obviously had probably a rip-roaring start to the year and then gained a few here and there towards the end of the year. But crucial. Like obviously, she had an injury in there as well, but came back towards the end of the year and played in finals. And her game came on a lot last year. I was really impressed with how she's come on, and she's
absolutely. Yeah, I think announced herself in a way to the competition itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that game against the Dogs that she kicked 4, and just as a player that I think she's one that you and I highlighted a lot last year, is one that we've seen like the development, the exponential development of where her skill set was from when she turned up at Port Adelaide to where she was last year. Was like you could see the development in her kicking and her confidence and her marking and all those things, and just in general game intelligence. You could just see that she's grown so much in her time at Port Adelaide, which is kind of like one of the things you and I are enjoying a lot about watching this women's team develop. 9th, 8th, and 7th all on 19 votes each, which just shows some evenness across some of the votes down the list. Kirsty Lamb, Piper Window, and Gemma Houghton all ended up on 19 votes. All players that had moments throughout the year, were in and out of games a little bit. Piper Window obviously grew into the year. Gemma Houghton, you and I have talked about, we love her and think she's she's a real barometer of the side.
Barometer,
and float in and out of games though, which is dependent on how the game's going, and sometimes just her own mercurial talent that she sometimes tries to pull off the thing that she, the impossible act. But the fact that she tries to do that is what leads her to doing some of those impossible acts at times. That's just the game that she plays, and she is incredible. Kirsty Lamb, obviously all Australian from Western Bulldogs that we brought across last year. Childhood Port Adelaide fan, wears number 35 because of Chad Corns. Like, great story. And she was the way she was utilised last year. I think like 19 votes probably makes sense for her. Like, she was not always the integral part of the middle of the field or and forward line, but her impact in between those lines was really felt in just her desire and everything she did for the ball. And Piper Window just grew into the season fantastically for a rookie. So 3 players and 19 votes that all kind of are going to be great going forward for us as well. 20 votes, and in 6th was Molly Brooksby, another rookie. A few rookies on this list actually. Molly Brooksby, and a great pickup again, like our talent acquisition and drafting and whatever ways we can pick up players through the FLW pathways that have been available to us as a side the last few years have been fantastic. But Brooksby was an incredible pickup last year, and she's going to be such a key, played beyond her rookie year last year, I think, and was actually helped our defense develop far quicker than I was expecting it to. So, love Brooksby. In 5th, Ashley Woodland, 25 votes. I think she's just incredible and often goes unsung. I think we've talked about a few times. Like some games, depending on the game.
I think because she was utilised in multiple areas of the field last season, whereas she came into our setup as a goal kicker, whereas she's kind of had to change, and she changed very well. She's a beast.
Little Westoffy, little Chad Cornsey, like this.
Her cleanliness with the football is a lot better than some of her counterparts in the competition, and her attack on the ball is commendable as well.
Yeah, and she had some real game-winning moments, which is and she's again going to be part of the system for a while yet. So another great pickup through again those pathways that we have to get acquiring talent over the last few years. 30 jumps up a little bit now. So 39 votes in 4th, Shanae Goody, again another rookie. She's one of those ones I talked about with you last year. She's one of those ones that you can see has grown up with AFLW as a pathway, and she's utilizing that, and her talent is, sometimes you can just see those moments where she just tries to bite off a little bit more than she can chew based on just, game experience. But as far as her raw talent goes, she's far and beyond many that are years ahead of her, and as far as age goes, but she's a scary proposition for the competition going forward.
Yeah, totally agree.
3rd, this one's interesting because she did win our best and fairest in for the club. Matilda Schultz in our votes only.
Yeah,
I thought
when it came to the end, it obviously seemed like we were marking her a bit more harshly than clearly the coaches were.
Yeah,
but while still relishing in her existence at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're huge fans of her, obviously. But she's 3rd in our votes with 41. The big surprise for me doing the count, and not surprised because we both love her, but just the fact that she actually, just with the votes she accumulated across the year that came in 2nd, was Maria Maloney with 44 votes from us, which I think is a great effort. Reflection of consistency. We both grew. We've obviously seen her across the last couple of years, but just her, when our side got better last year, she went with it, and actually all those things, those intangibles that she has in her game, and just that discipline and effort that she has actually just grew with the game that we have, and were plus points to it, and literally just gained votes from us throughout the year and got her into 2nd in our votes. Which leaves, obviously, and congratulations to our FLW Creedcast Player of the Year for 2024. No doubt about it, Abby Dowrick. And I think despite the Port Adelaide, and I have no issues with Port Adelaide awarding the best and fairest to Matilda Schultz, I just think Abby Dowrick is our best player at the moment.
I think she was too. I agree with that. Yeah.
She's just what she can do, her goal scoring ability as a midfielder, like she's got that. There's that Dusty Martin ability, and Jason HORNE-FRANCIS. I know I'm comparing to men's players, but it's just as a comparison point, I think she has that bullish ability in midfield to take over a game with her midfield running power, and then just her ability in the forward line as well. She did have some crucial moments in kicking goals.
It's clearances, it's tackles, it's possessions, it's goal contributions. Yeah, it's the whole package and consistency of that effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's considering her pathway to get to our side, she hasn't come through the draft, it's been in and out of the waffle system, and it shows just consistency of effort and sticking to your craft and everything. I love her as a player, and she seems to have settled in well at Port Adelaide, and is growing every year. And she's still so young as a footballer that we've got a real centerpiece to build around with all of these. Obviously, some of these studs that we've just talked about in the votes leading up to her. It's a scary proposition for the future of the league, but for us as Port Adelaide fans, it's a wonderful proposition. We get to watch all these players play for years to come, and Abby Dowrick leading the way, I think, is a pretty good way to fucking do it.
Yeah. She's a gun of competition, and she will be for years to come.
Yeah. No, stoked to watch her. So, congrats to Abby, runaway winner of our 2024 AFLW Player of the Year for the Creedcast. So looking forward to doing all that again this year. As we said, Sweeney will be renamed to a name with perpetuity for this year for the men. And later in the year, we'll get to the women's awards again, obviously, when the women's season comes. Let's wrap it up, because we've been going for a few hours here and packed a lot into it, though. I think we've done it quite well to pack a fair bit into a podcast.
It's been a chonky episode, that's for sure.
Yes, chonky.
Thanks for sticking with us.
We appreciate everyone that always sticks with us to the end of the podcast. We know some of you do, and you're legends for doing it, because we do like to rattle and prattle, but that's what Adelaide football does to us. It makes us want to talk. So, we're looking forward to getting to the structure of having review and preview again, which will be starting from next week, which is fucking fantastic. So, I'm not going to rattle on any longer. I know Jamie's got it's a Tuesday night. We've got work. I don't have work tomorrow, but Jamie probably does. So I'm going to close it off by saying, "Can the fucking pair? It's game week, baby. Let's fucking go."
Yeah, go Power! Come on, boys.
Now